Before we begin, take a long, steady breath. Let it rise like morning mist, then fall away like rain. Now, find your place, however your body wants to listen. Still, supported, free of tension. The mind often begins to race before the world even stirs. But in Zen, the dawn is seen as sacred, a window through which the pure awareness of life shines before we cover it with plans and names. Each story tonight is like that window, clear, open, unhurried. If you feel called, share what time it is where you're listening, or what you hope to see more clearly after these stories. The act of sharing connects our hearts across distance and time. Breathe once more, gently. You are exactly where you need to be. We begin our story in stillness. He sat beneath the Bodhi tree, its roots like arms cradling the earth, its leaves trembling in the hush before dawn. Siddhartha was still, not because he had nothing left to do, but because he had found the one thing worth doing. The grass beneath him held the warmth of day's memory. The river nearby whispered its ancient lullaby. Above, stars thinned into morning. And within him, the silence grew deep. He had made his vow to remain unmoved until he had reached the end of suffering. And so he breathed, in, outside. The body sat like a mountain. The mind watched like the sky. But truth, before it flowers, is always tested, and so came Mara. Mara, the tempter, the king of illusion, the force of resistance in all beings who inch toward awakening. He did not come in one form, but many, not with a single sword, but with 1,000 voices. First, Mara sent desire. His daughters appeared, radiant and swaying. Their forms shimmered with beauty. Their voices sang sweet lullabies of longing and delight. They danced before the still figure under the tree, their laughter like bells. But Siddhartha did not stir. Their beauty held no hook. His gaze did not linger. He saw not bodies, but masks. Not pleasure, but impermanence. Desire passed like perfume on the wind. Then Mara sent fear. The sky darkened, thunder cracked, demons emerged from shadows, fangs bared, eyes aflame, weapons of fire and bone in hand. They rushed the tree, screamed into Siddhartha's ears, hurled spears of doubt and arrows of terror. But Siddhartha did not flinch. The weapons turned to lotus petals as they neared him. The demons screamed, but their voices died in the vast silence that surrounded him. Fear had no place where nothing was clung to. Next came pride. Mara appeared himself, seated atop a colossal elephant, cloaked in glory. He laughed with disdain. "Who do you think you are?" he asked. "A prince playing holy man. What gives you the right to seek truth? You are alone, no teacher, no witness." Siddhartha looked up, calm and clear. He reached his right hand to touch the earth. And the earth responded. It is said that in that moment, the earth itself bore witness. The ground trembled gently. A breeze swept through the grove. The Bodhi tree's leaves shimmered like stars. The earth, vast and ancient, acknowledged Siddhartha's right to awaken. Mara's elephant stumbled. His illusions cracked. His army scattered like dust in wind. The tempter vanished, and all was still again. But the night was not yet over. With Mara gone, Siddhartha turned inward, deeper than ever before. He saw his past lives, hundreds, thousands, as farmer and king, as bird and beggar, as woman, child, beast, each life carrying joy and sorrow, birth and death. He saw the law of karma, how intentions shaped outcomes, how cruelty echoed, how kindness grew roots across lifetimes. He saw the chain of suffering, ignorance giving rise to craving, craving to clinging, clinging to becoming, becoming to birth, birth to decay and death. He saw that to break the chain, one must see clearly and let go. The dawn approached. The sky shifted from indigo to pale rose. Birds stirred in branches. The river shimmered. And in the first light of that new day, Siddhartha saw it, not as concept, not as hope, but as direct knowing. He saw the four noble truths, that suffering exists, that it arises from craving, that it can end, and that there is a path to its end. He saw the eightfold path unfolding before him like stepping stones across a great river. He saw suffering, and he saw its end. And in that moment, as the sun broke the horizon and the world breathed anew, Siddhartha became the Buddha, the awakened one. He opened his eyes, and the dew on every leaf sparkled with the same truth. Mara had been defeated, not with sword, not with spell, but with stillness, with clarity, with the earth itself as witness. The man who had walked away from gold and pleasure, who had starved beside the river, who had sat unmoved through storm and illusion, had now touched the infinite. And he smiled, not with triumph, but with compassion, because now he would teach, and the world would begin to wake. A monk once travelled alone through a deep forest. He'd been walking for days, through mud, through heat, through cold rain. He carried nothing but a worn robe, a begging bowl, and a satchel with a single stone inside. Why the stone? He could not say, only that a teacher once gave it to him and said, "Carry this until you understand its weight." The monk took it literally, and dutifully he carried the stone. At first, it seemed like nothing, but as the months passed, over hills, across rivers, through deserts, it began to burden him. His back ached, his hands calloused, his mind grew resentful. "Why must I carry this?" he muttered one evening, dropping beside a creek. He looked at the stone, round, dark, unremarkable, a simple weight, and yet it had become everything. That night, he slept beneath the stars, and he dreamed. In the dream, he stood in an endless field beneath a vast open sky. He held the stone tightly, afraid to drop it, afraid he might lose something important. Then a voice, calm and distant, whispered, "Are you carrying the stone, or is the stone carrying you?" He awoke just before dawn, heart racing. The sky above him was pale and soft, wide and light. He looked at the stone again and understood. This is the story of thoughts, identity, and the illusion of burdens, how what we cling to becomes our weight. Commentary. Many of us carry stones, regret, shame, an old story someone once told us about who we are, a wound we've wrapped ourselves around for so long it feels like identity. We think we're being strong, but strength is not clinging. It's knowing when to let go. The monk carried the stone because he trusted his teacher. But trust without inquiry is like walking in darkness without asking if there's a door. His real practice began not when he received the stone, but when he questioned it. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from attachment, even to things that seem noble: tradition, memory, belief, self-image. We say, "This is who I am." But who is saying it? And what happens when the self no longer fits? The stone was not the problem. The gripping was. The fear of what it meant to be without it. We carry pain from the past because we think dropping it means forgetting. We carry roles that no longer serve us because we think they are us. We carry anger because we think it protects us. But a clenched fist cannot hold the sky. Later that day, the monk stood on a hilltop and watched the clouds pass. He held the stone in both hands, not angrily, not resentfully, just with awareness, and then he set it gently on the ground, not thrown, not discarded, just returned. A breeze touched his robe. The clouds shifted. He took his next step, and it felt like the first. In that moment, he realized the sky had always been there, unbothered, unburdened, vast, and that somewhere along the way, he had confused being grounded with being weighed down. This is the nature of the mind. It can be like a stone, heavy, fixated, stuck in the past, or like the sky, open, vast, always able to hold the weather without becoming it. The monk never told others to drop their stones. He simply told this story and ended it with a question. What are you carrying that is carrying you? So, pause today. Look gently at the weight in your hands, your heart, your mind, and ask yourself, do I still need this to walk? Or have I mistaken the stone for my path? There was once a mirror. Polished and flawless, it reflected everything. The mountain at dawn, the child's laugh, the tired lines on an old woman's face. It made no judgment. It added nothing. It simply showed the truth. But slowly, over time, dust began to settle on the mirror. Just a little each day. First, the soft film of daily life, breath, skin, wind. Then more, smoke from cooking fires, damp from morning rain. The mirror was not broken, but what it showed became dull, distorted, not because it had changed, but because the dust had gathered. One day, someone passed by and frowned. "This mirror is useless," they said. "It doesn't reflect anything clearly." Another agreed. "It must be flawed." But then an old caretaker stepped forward. She took a cloth, wiped once, twice, 3 times, and beneath her hand, the shine returned, not because she added anything, but because she removed what didn't belong. This is the story of the mind, not just in Buddhism, in life. Your mind is a mirror, naturally clear, naturally reflective. It was never meant to cling, or distort, or judge. It was meant to see. But like the mirror, it gathers dust, thoughts, memories, opinions, wounds, desires, stories. Each one a fine layer, each one settling so softly that you hardly notice, until one day, you no longer see clearly. You don't see the other person, you see your story about them. You don't feel this moment, you feel your expectations. You don't hear the sound of the bell, you hear your evaluation of its pitch. Not because you are broken, but because there's dust, and dust can be wiped away. In the Zen tradition, this teaching is central. A monk once asked the master, "What is enlightenment?" The master picked up a cloth and said, "Wipe your mirror." You don't have to become something new. You don't have to add insight or brilliance. You don't have to fix yourself. You only have to clear the dust, not all at once, not perfectly, just honestly and patiently. Meditation is not performance. It is polishing. Each breath, a gentle wipe. Each moment of awareness, a cloth across the surface. Not dramatic, not flashy, but steady. And over time, things begin to gleam. One day you sit, you feel anxious, you name it. Dust, you return to the breath. Another thought, dust. You return again and again. And after many days or months or years, you look up and realize the world is more beautiful, not because it changed, but because now you're seeing it. There's a line in the Platform Sutra. Our nature is originally pure. It is because of false thoughts that we cannot realize it. This is not a scolding. It is an invitation. It says, your clarity is still there. Don't give up. Just wipe gently. Sometimes we think dust is who we are. I am angry. I am anxious. I am not enough. But you are not the dust. You are the mirror beneath it, always capable of reflecting light. Even anger, when seen clearly, becomes insight. Even sorrow, when held with presence, becomes compassion. Even fear, when understood, becomes freedom. Because when the mirror clears, everything reveals its true shape. Commentary. The mirror and the dust is not just a metaphor, it is a daily practice. It teaches us that effort matters, that clarity is not permanent, but neither is confusion. That we don't need to judge the dust, just see it and wipe. You may sit today and feel cloudy. Thoughts may swirl, but every moment you stay, every time you bring your hand to the surface of your own experience, you are remembering, you are seeing, you are restoring the mirror. In a monastery garden, a novice once asked his teacher, "How do I become wise?" The teacher handed him a cloth and pointed to the windows. "Start here," he said. And so the novice began. And as the glass cleared, so did his mind. The world doesn't need you to shine brighter. It needs you to see clearly. And the first step is this. Pause. Look at your thoughts. Smile at them. And then wipe gently, without shame. Because beneath it all, you are always the mirror. As we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen Buddhism, let us turn to a tale about recognition and the true nature of worth. This is the next story. In the days when animals still spoke the language of the wind and trees, there lived a turtle in a wide, sparkling pond near the edge of a small village. The water was clean. The lilies bloomed. Dragonflies shimmered like tiny blades of light, and frogs sang in harmony beneath the moon. And in the center of it all, floating lazily on a flat, sun-warmed rock, was a turtle with a sharp mind and a sharper tongue. He was clever, observant, wise even, but he had one weakness. He could not stop talking. This turtle, who in a past life had been the Buddha, spent his days offering advice to fish, telling stories to tadpoles, and correcting the herons who perched too long on the reeds. He spoke of the stars, of the weather, of the foolishness of men and the arrogance of birds. And many listened at first. But over time, some began to swim a little farther from his rock. The frogs coughed politely and leapt away. Even the dragonflies found quieter lily pads to rest on. Still, the turtle spoke. He spoke when no one was near. He spoke when others slept. He spoke not to be heard, but because silence felt like drowning. One summer, the rains did not come. The sky cracked but gave no water. The pond shrank. Lilies withered. The fish moved deeper, their numbers fewer each day. 2 wild geese, passing overhead, noticed the shrinking pond and circled down. They landed beside the turtle and dipped their beaks in the muddy shallows. "This place won't last much longer," one said. "Soon it will be dry." The other nodded. "We should help whoever we can." The turtle, curious, swam closer. "Help? How?" The first goose blinked. "We will carry the small fish to deeper waters, and if you like, we can carry you too." The turtle's eyes widened. "You would do that?" "Of course," said the second goose, "but only if you can stay silent." "Silent?" the turtle echoed. "Yes," said the first. "We will hold a stick between our beaks. You must bite down on the center and hold on. But if you speak, even one word, you'll fall." The turtle hesitated. Not talk? For an entire journey? He looked around. The pond was shrinking. His friends were gone. The mud cracked beneath the sun. He took a breath. "Very well," he said. "I will be silent." The next morning, the geese returned with a sturdy stick. They each gripped one end in their beaks. The turtle bit down on the center with determination. Together, they rose into the sky, wings strong, the turtle dangling like a pendant between them. He had never seen the world like this before. Forests stretched like ocean waves. Rivers wound like silver ropes. Hills rolled beneath them like sleeping beasts. And far below, people looked up and pointed. "Look!" a child cried. "A flying turtle!" Laughter rippled through the village. A man shaded his eyes. "What a strange sight! A turtle who thinks he's a bird." They laughed louder. They clapped and jeered. The turtle heard every word. His mouth tightened on the stick. He thought of clever comebacks, of biting remarks, of lessons he could teach these fools from above. And then he couldn't help himself. "I'll show you who's foolish." But the moment his mouth opened, he fell. Down, down through the sky, tumbling through wind and silence and regret until he struck the earth and never rose again. The geese circled once, then flew on. And below, the villagers stood in stunned silence beside the broken shell of the creature who could not stay silent. Later, when this tale reached the forest monasteries, a monk asked the Buddha, "Was the turtle's mistake pride?" "No," said the Buddha, "it was attachment. Not to his body, but to his voice, to the belief that every thought must be shared." He looked at the monk kindly. "There is wisdom in knowing when to speak, but greater wisdom in knowing when not to." And so, the story of the turtle who couldn't stop talking passed from village to village. not as mockery, but as reminder that words are like seeds. They grow even when we forget we've planted them, and some, if spoken at the wrong time, can fall like stones. Because restraint is not weakness. It is strength disguised as silence, and sometimes silence is the loudest wisdom of all. It was still dark when the monk lit the kitchen fire. Outside, the mountain air clung to the stones like breath not yet exhaled. Frost kissed the corners of the monastery walls, and the wind had not yet stirred the bell. But inside, the kitchen was alive. The Tenzo, the head cook, moved with quiet care. He chopped vegetables with reverence, washed rice as though touching the Dharma, boiled water like preparing an offering to the unseen. Not because guests were coming, not because someone was watching, but because every movement was practice. In Zen monasteries, the Tenzo is not just a cook. He is a teacher, a practitioner, a guardian of presence. His role is not low, it is sacred, because Zen does not draw lines between spiritual and ordinary. It dissolves them, and what remains is just this moment. And this moment includes rice. The great Zen master Dogen once wrote a full text on this, instructions for the Tenzo. He said, "Do not treat cooking lightly. When you cook rice, wash your mind. When you slice roots, cut away delusion." He had learned this lesson young. When Dogen first arrived in China seeking true Dharma, he met an elderly Tenzo in a seaside monastery. The man was in his 60s, sun-worn, with sleeves rolled and hands deep in soaking beans. Dogen bowed respectfully. "Venerable one," he said, "why do you, at your age and rank, work in the kitchen?" The old monk looked up and said, "If not me, then who? And if not now, then when?" Dogen offered to help. The Tenzo smiled. "Thank you," he said, "but this is my practice." Later that day, Dogen saw the same monk drying mushrooms in the sun. He asked, "Why not do this tomorrow? The sun will rise again." The Tenzo simply said, "I do not wait for tomorrow's sun. My life is today." And in that moment, Dogen understood something deeper than scripture. That enlightenment is not found apart from daily life, but within it, in the steam rising from a pot, in the rhythm of chopping, in the patience of stirring porridge without haste. Years later, as a master, Dogen taught his students, when you cook, just cook. Don't think, I am cooking. Don't think, this is just food. Don't think, this is not meditation. Make every motion the expression of the way. In the monastery, the Tenzo bows before entering the kitchen. He arranges the knives, washes the board. He does not multitask. He does not rush. When he stirs everything. When he scrubs the pot, he scrubs the self. There is no low task, only low awareness. There is a koan that asks, "What is Buddha?" One master answered, 3 pounds of flax. Another said, "The rice cake on the shelf." Because Zen knows, the sacred hides in plain sight. Not above us, not beyond us, but within the ordinary, when seen without distraction. In modern life, we resist this. We see chores as interruptions, dishes as delays, errands as obstacles to real practice. But Zen asks, what if the very thing you're avoiding is your path? What if folding laundry is a bow? What if sweeping the floor is a blessing? What if cleaning the toilet is a teaching and letting go? The Tenzo is not trying to finish cooking. He is inhabiting it. With full presence, with full breath, with no need for applause. Because practice is not what we do on the cushion, it is how we live off it. Dogen wrote, "See with your ears, hear with your eyes. Prepare the food with your whole body-mind." Not poetry, not metaphor, instruction to become so present that the boundaries dissolve. To listen to the rice as it boils, to feel the carrot before slicing, to bow to the ladle before lifting it. Because when we fully meet a moment, there is no self left to be enlightened. Only the moment, only the rice, only the breath. Once, a student complained, "Master, I have no time for meditation. I spend all day in the kitchen." The master asked, "Do you wash the rice?" "Yes." "Do you chop the greens?" "Yes." "Then why do you call that not meditating?" Commentary. Zen dismantles the hierarchy between sacred and mundane. It reminds us, you don't need incense to wake up. You don't need chants to be present. You need rice and a spoon, and the willingness to give yourself to both without resistance. If you're waiting for your life to get quieter before you practice, you may wait forever. But if you meet this moment, this task, as the way itself, then even the laundry becomes a sutra. Even the shopping list becomes a mantra. Even the broom becomes your teacher. The Tenzo is not just feeding bodies, he is cooking truth. And when the pot is washed, the ladle hung, and the kitchen swept, there is nothing left to attain, because it was never somewhere else. It was always here. In the steam, in the stillness, in the rhythm of this one breath, the forest lay still beneath the afternoon sun, warm and golden, its edges softened by the hush of tall grass and the rustle of distant leaves. Along a winding riverbank, deer moved like whispers, elegant, careful, serene. They drank from the clear water, nibbled the green shoots, and lifted their heads with ears poised to catch the smallest sound. Among them walked a deer, unlike the others. Tall, golden brown, with a coat that shimmered like silk, and eyes that held not fear, but understanding. He was the Buddha in a life long before his final birth. And he was known as the king of the banyan deer. In this forest, two great herds lived side by side, the banyan deer and the branch deer. Each herd had its king, but only one ruled with wisdom and mercy. The king of the banyan deer cared for his herd as a father cares for his children. He ensured the weakest were protected. He shared shade and water with all. And when conflict stirred, he calmed it with reason, never violence. But far beyond the forest, beyond even the river's reach, sat a palace of polished stone. There lived a human king, powerful, proud, and enamored with the hunt. He loved the thrill of the chase, the cries of hounds, the clatter of hooves, the fall of the body. But he grew tired of riding so far for the kill. And so one day he declared, "Let the deer be driven into the royal park. I will hunt them there at my leisure." His men rode into the forest, scattering the herds. Mothers called for fawns. Hooves pounded through brush and mud, and by force, fear and fire, hundreds of deer were herded into the park's high-walled grounds. The king of the banyan deer and the king of the branch deer were among them. The hunt began. Each day, The human king would enter the park and fire his arrows. The deer ran. Many fell. The others huddled in dread, knowing not who would die next. So the two deer kings came together. "This cannot go on," said the banyan deer. "Too many suffer. Too many die. There must be a way to spare the herd greater agony." The branch deer narrowed his eyes. "You would deal with the hunter?" "No," said the banyan deer. "I would speak to the man." That night, while the moon hung low and silent, the banyan deer stood at the gates of the palace. The guards laughed at first until they saw his eyes. They led him in, and the next morning, the king, amused by the boldness of the creature, agreed to listen. "You are brave to come," he said, "but also foolish. Speak, and I may spare you, or I may make a rug of your hide." The deer bowed his head, not in fear, but in respect. "My lord," he said calmly, "your arrows fall without pattern. The deer live in terror. Let there be order. Each day we will offer one deer willingly. No chase, no cruelty. Just one life, given so the rest may live without panic." The court gasped. The king blinked. "You would offer your own kind?" "To save many, yes." The king, impressed by this wisdom, agreed. And so it was that each day one deer came forward, chosen in turn, first from the branch deer, then from the banyan deer. There was no fleeing, no screaming, only quiet surrender. But one morning the chosen deer did not come. Instead, a young doe, trembling thin, appeared at the palace gate, her eyes wide with grief. "My lord," she whispered, bowing low, "today was my husband's turn, but I have just birthed a fawn. If I die today, it will surely perish." She wept softly. "Please, let me live just a little longer. Let someone else take my place. Let me nurse it just until it walks." The king said nothing. He looked at his ministers, at his guards, at the doe, crouched low and shaking. Then he said, "No, the order is the order. You must go." The deer turned her head to hide her sobs. But before the guards could move, a shadow stepped into the courtyard. Tall, still, golden, the king of the banyan deer. "I will take her place," he said. The king frowned. "But it is not your turn. She is from the branch deer herd." "I do not care," said the banyan deer. "A life is a life, and compassion does not ask about herd or rank." The court fell silent. The deer turned to the doe and lowered his head. "Go, raise your child." The human king stood, his face unreadable. "You would die for one not your own, for one you do not even know." "Yes," the deer said, "because I do know her. She is like me. She feels fear. She loves her child, and I will not let her weep alone." The king sat back down slowly. No one spoke. And then, with a deep breath, he looked to the sky above. What kind of creature gives his life for another? The deer said simply, "One who understands that all life is the same." The king rose. "No more," he said. "No more killing. No more hunting. Not here. Not in the park. Not in the forest." He turned to his court. "Let the gates be opened. Let them go free." And so it was. The deer returned to the wild. the herds rejoined. The mother nursed her child beneath the whispering trees, and the king of the banyan deer stood once more at the edge of the river, watching, not for enemies, but for peace. In time, the story spread, told around fires, carved into temple walls, painted in soft colors across ancient scrolls. And always it bore the same lesson. To speak truth to power is rare. To speak with compassion is rarer still. But to do both without fear, even to your own risk, that is the mark of true nobility. Even in a deer, even in a forest, even when the one you face holds arrows and gold. Because courage is not always loud. Sometimes it bows low. Sometimes it says, "Let me go instead." And sometimes it changes the heart of a king. As we move deeper into the quiet teachings of Zen, we come to a story about seeing clearly and understanding true value. Listen carefully to the next story. It began in the hush before dawn, when the breath of the world still rested and time itself seemed unsure whether to move forward. In the palace of Kapilavastu, marble pillars loomed like frozen trees, casting long shadows across the corridors. Every corner, every curtain, every tapestry whispered of wealth and beauty. But the prince, Siddhartha, had stopped hearing the music in it. He had seen what no prince was meant to see: old age, sickness, death, and a seeker who walked without fear. In the days that followed the four sights, Siddhartha moved through the palace like a man carrying a secret too heavy to name. He sat through the court banquets without appetite. He watched dancers move in silk, their feet light as feathers, but his thoughts moved heavier than stone. Yasodhara, his wife, had noticed his silence. She placed her hand gently over his, but it trembled. Rahula, their newborn son, reached for him with tiny fingers, but Siddhartha's eyes filled with both love and sorrow. He did not lack affection, he lacked answers. That night the moon hung low and golden in the sky, a silent witness to the choice being made within royal walls. The city of Kapilavastu lay sleeping, its gates shut, its guards at rest, its people dreaming of festivals and fortunes. But inside Siddhartha's chamber, there was no sleep. He stood over his son's cradle, his gaze long and quiet. Rahula stirred, then stilled again. Siddhartha touched the boy's cheek, memorizing the softness. A father's heart broke quietly inside him. A part of him longed to stay, to watch this child grow, to hold Yasodhara as the years passed. But another part of him, the deeper part, knew that to truly love them, he had to leave. Not for escape, not for abandonment, but to find an end to the suffering that would one day find them all. He crossed the chamber in silence, his footsteps bare. He passed the sleeping guards with a nod of gratitude. He paused once in the marble garden, where fountains trickled like stilled song. Stars wheeled above him in still constellations. Waiting at the outer gate was Channa, his loyal charioteer, and Kantaka, his white horse who had carried him through battles, festivals, and boyhood rides under open skies. Siddhartha took one last look at the palace that had been his whole world. Then he nodded. No orders, no drums, no farewell speech, just stillness and the beginning of something eternal. Channa led them through side streets. Siddhartha's cloak billowed slightly in the breeze, though the air was warm. As they neared the city gates, it is said the gods themselves descended to still the sound of hooves and hinges. The gatekeeper slept on, unaware that the one who was born to inherit the throne was walking away from it forever. Miles passed beneath them, past farmlands and shrines, past temples and banyan trees, and as dawn neared, they reached the forest's edge. There, beneath a fig tree bathed in pale starlight, Siddhartha dismounted. He stepped away from the saddle and removed his crown. It was heavy, not in gold, but in memory. He untied his earrings and placed them gently in Channa's hands. Then, drawing his sword, he cut away his long, dark hair, symbol of his royalty, of his past. He let the strands fall into the wind. He removed his silken robes, folding them with reverence, and exchanged them for a simple cloth robe, earth-coloured and plain. Then he turned to Channa. "Take Kanthaka home," he said softly. "Tell my father I have not left in rebellion, but in search of that which is beyond birth and death." Channa's eyes filled with tears. "My lord, may I not follow you?" Siddhartha placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "You will serve the Dharma more by returning than by following. Go. Tell them I am not lost. Tell them I am becoming." It is said that Kanthaka cried as he was led away. Some say the noble horse died of grief, his heart broken by parting. Others say his spirit was reborn among the stars. But Siddhartha did not look back. Barefoot, stripped of every title and comfort, he stepped into the forest. Birds stirred in the canopy. Mist hung low over the earth. The world ahead was wild and wide, but in that moment, he felt lighter than he ever had. No walls, no servants, no titles, just breathe, and the path. He walked deeper, alone, the forest accepting him without question. He drank from rivers, sat beneath trees, listened to wind move through leaves. He began to study with sages and ascetics, learning from their fire rituals and their breath practices, their renunciations and their silences. He fasted until his ribs showed like shadows. He sat still until ants walked over his knees. But in all this, he remained watchful. For he knew that extreme indulgence had not brought peace. And now he saw that extreme denial did not either. His journey would continue, but it had already begun. The great departure was not just a leaving, it was a shedding. Not just of privilege, but of illusion. The prince became a wanderer. The heir became a seeker, and the world, though it did not know it yet, was about to change. Because one man had dared to step outside the gates and walk silently, humbly toward truth. She was just the cleaning woman. That's what most called her. Not nun, not practitioner, not devotee, just the woman who swept the temple. She arrived before sunrise, her hair tied back in a grey knot, her robes plain and faded, her broom worn thin at the bristles. She did not chant, did not preach, did not study sutras in the main hall. She swept the stone walkways, the meditation hall. The steps no one noticed were dusty until they were clean. And when she swept, she smiled. Some of the younger monks whispered, "She's not really practicing. She doesn't even sit in the morning zazen. She just does chores." But she never responded. She bowed to them anyway. Years passed. One by one, the monks left for higher temples, deeper study, more advanced masters. But she remained, still sweeping, still silent, still smiling. One spring morning, the abbot called for an assembly. The monks gathered, some sitting in strict posture, others blinking away sleep. The abbot raised his voice gently. "I have been observing this temple for many years," he said. "And in all this time, only one among you has reached the heart of the Dharma." Heads turned. The scholars straightened their backs. The meditation leaders adjusted their robes. The younger monks held their breath. And then the abbot looked to her, the woman with the broom. She was in the corner, brushing dust from the edge of a wooden beam. She paused, looked up, and smiled. A silence fell over the room. Then whispers. But she never studied the Diamond Sutra. She never debates koans. She doesn't even recite the Heart Sutra. The abbot turned to them and said, "She lives it." This is the story of embodied wisdom, the kind that doesn't speak loudly, but moves like breath through a humble act. Commentary. There is a great misunderstanding in spiritual life, that awakening comes only through texts, or teachers, or temples. But the Buddha taught in forests. He sat beneath trees. He pointed to rivers and mountains and empty bowls. He said, "The way is not in the sky, the way is in the heart." The woman who swept the temple did not need to talk about mindfulness. She was mindfulness. Every stroke of her broom was deliberate, every step a prayer, every breath a chant. She did not perform her devotion, she lived it. You can memorize every scripture and still miss the truth. You can quote the sutras and still live with bitterness. But you cannot sweep the floor with love for 30 years and not be changed. The Dharma is not performance. It is not approval. It is presence. Many monks seek truth like a prize. They strive. They compare. They seek recognition. But the woman who swept the temple had no audience, no ambition, only a broom, a path, and her attention. That is enough. That is more than enough. There's a Zen saying, "Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water." Because the truth doesn't take you away from the world. It brings you deeper into it. It makes you pay attention. To dust in corners, to the sound of your own breath, to how gently you place a bowl on the table. We live in a time of noise, of opinions, of spectacle, of credentials. But the Dharma whispers, sweep, breathe, smile, and mean it. That is enough. So wherever you are, whether folding laundry, washing dishes, answering emails, tying your child's shoes, do it with all of you. Do it like the woman who swept the temple, and let the dust be your teacher too. There was a spider who spun her web in the rafters of the meditation hall. No one noticed her at first. She was small, thin-legged, her thread finer than the morning mist. But slowly as the days passed, her web grew, spanning beam to beam. A fragile bridge suspended in stillness. A young monk sweeping the floors one morning looked up. He paused. Something about the web held him. It glimmered faintly in the dawn light, each thread stretching toward another as if in quiet conversation. He brought his discovery to the abbot. "Should I remove it?" he asked. "It doesn't belong in the hall." The abbot looked up, tilted his head, smiled. "She belongs exactly where she is," he said, "and perhaps she's teaching more than we are." From that day forward, The monks left the web untouched. They meditated beneath it, bowed in its presence, watched as dew sometimes gathered along its strands, like pearls of stillness. One day, the young monk saw a tiny gnat caught in the web. He felt a pang of sorrow, moved closer, but before he could act, the spider emerged, wrapped the insect, and retreated. He asked the abbot again, "How can something so beautiful cause harm?" The abbot nodded slowly. "A web is not cruel," he said. "It is simply a truth." He continued, "Connection is not always comfort, but everything touches everything else." He gestured around the hall. "You see walls, mats, windows, candles, but they are not separate." He pointed up. "That spider reminds us. One thread trembles, and the whole web feels it." The monk began to notice more. How a sharp word at breakfast changed the tone of the morning. How a kind gesture rippled through the day. How his own thoughts, when tangled, echoed outward into others. One evening during Zazen, a gust of wind slipped through the shutters. The spider's web quivered, and every monk in the room turned slightly. Not toward the wind, but toward the movement of the web, as if they all felt it at once. There is a teaching in the Avatamsaka Sutra. In the realm of Indra's net, each jewel reflects all others. To touch one is to touch the whole. The spider did not preach. She simply spun, her work invisible until noticed, and then unforgettable. Months later, the web collapsed in a storm. Gone, no trace. But the young monk no longer looked for it above. He had begun to see the web everywhere. In the way the cook's ladle touched the soup pot. In the way the bell echoed down the hallway. In the way a smile from a stranger reached deep into his chest. Everything. Connected. Everything. Touching. Nothing. Alone. With each step on the Zen path, a new lesson unfolds. Now we turn to a story about recognition, of self, of others, and of what truly matters. Listen carefully to the next story. The sun shimmered over the canopy of an ancient forest, casting dappled light onto the wide, glistening river that snaked through its heart. The air was rich with the scent of ripe fruit and warm leaves. Birds called lazily from the branches, and deep in this green sanctuary, there lived a great band of monkeys, free, agile, unafraid. They were led by a king, not crowned with gold nor seated on a throne, but known by every heart in the jungle as a being of rare strength, deep wisdom, and boundless love. He was the Buddha in a past life, and his name was whispered with reverence among the trees. Mahakapi, the great monkey king. The troop followed him not out of fear, but from trust. He chose the ripest fruit for the weakest among them. He led them across rivers in flood. He taught the young how to leap, and the old how to rest. And when predators stalked the forest floor, he stood between his people and the teeth of death. But even such noble creatures cannot stay hidden from the eyes of kings. Far downstream, where the river widened and palace walls gleamed under the sun, there lived a human king. He was wealthy, powerful, and restless. One morning, while drinking sweet water from a golden cup, he bit into a mango unlike any he had tasted. Its flesh was fragrant, smooth, almost glowing. He turned to his servants, astonished. Where did this come from? He demanded. A trembling servant bowed low. From the northern forest, Your Majesty. It was carried by the river. The king stood. Then that forest shall be mine. And so he rode, hundreds of soldiers at his back, their armor clinking like distant thunder. Across plains, over hills, and into the great northern woods they marched, until they reached the grove where the mango tree stood. Its branches curved wide, heavy with golden fruit. And high in its arms, the monkeys feasted. The king looked up, and his joy turned to fury. They steal what is mine, he said. Surround the tree. Not one escapes. His archers raised their bows. The monkeys screamed and scrambled. Some fell. Some clung to the bark, trembling. Mothers shielded their babies. The tree that had fed them now became a trap. And the monkey king, Mahakapi, watched from a distance. He saw the ring of soldiers, the drawn bows, the trembling hearts of his people, and he knew there was no way down. Unless he climbed a tall cliff beside the river. From there he could see the mango tree, the forest, the fear. He wrapped his legs around the trunk of a strong bamboo stalk, measured the distance, and leapt. Across the sky he soared, limbs outstretched, heart steady. He reached the tree, but not the ground. His body caught a branch, and he hung there, arms extended, back arched across the gulf between safety and slaughter. A living bridge. He turned his head and called out, "Go! Cross me, now!" One by one, the monkeys scrambled onto his back. They clutched his fur, their tiny hands trembling. Some hesitated. Some wept. But they crossed, from danger to safety, over the back of the king who held and held and held, until the last one was gone. In the grove below, the human king had seen everything. He watched the great monkey fly, watched him cling, watched him bear the weight of an entire nation, and now he watched him fall. The monkey king's body gave out, muscles torn, spine twisted. He collapsed at the base of the tree, breath shallow, limbs crumpled like leaves after a storm. The human king approached, silent. This was not the enemy he imagined. This was not a beast. This was something else. He knelt. The monkey king opened his eyes. "You could have run," the human king whispered. "You could have saved yourself." The monkey breathed barely. But what would a king be without his people? Tears welled in the king's eyes. He had marched to conquer, to taste fruit, to claim land. But he had found something far richer: honor, selflessness, sacrifice. He turned to his soldiers. "Tend to him," he ordered. "Treat him with care." But it was too late. The monkey king's breath slowed, and then stopped. The human king built a shrine there, beneath the mango tree, not for conquest, not for glory, but for a being who had shown him what true kingship meant. And from that day on, he ruled differently. Not with fear, but with wisdom. Not with pride, but with service. He remembered the curve of that body stretched across space, the silence in which it held, the lesson it gave. Centuries later, the story would be carved into stone, painted onto temple walls, and passed from one mouth to another like a sacred fruit. Children would ask, "Is it true? Did a monkey really give his life?" And the elders would smile. Yes, they'd say, and in doing so, he taught the world how to live. Because sacrifice is not weakness, it is strength in its purest form. And a leader is not the one who commands the most, but the one willing to give the most, even his life, for those who trust him, for the good of all. Long ago, in a kingdom ringed by mountains and temples, a mighty king ruled from a palace of stone and gold. He was feared by his enemies, praised by poets, and followed by thousands. His armies stretched across the land. His wealth filled entire chambers, and his commands echoed through cities like thunder. But still, he was restless. Victory brought no peace. Praise faded quickly. Even sleep, wrapped in silk and guarded by soldiers, felt hollow. And so one morning, while gazing out across his kingdom from a marble balcony, the king spoke aloud. "Who in this world is greater than I?" A servant, sweeping quietly nearby, paused. "There is one," he said softly, eyes downcast. The king turned sharply. "Who?" "A sage," said the servant. "He lives alone in the forest, wears no crown, owns no gold. But they say he holds more peace in his silence than all your generals in battle." The king laughed. "A beggar in the woods, greater than me." But something in the servant's voice lingered. And later that night, when the court had gone quiet, the king summoned his best horse and rode out alone, disguised in simple robes, his face shadowed by the hood of a traveller. He rode for 2 days, through thick jungle, across rivers, past farmers and monks and children who did not bow. Finally, at the edge of a still grove, he saw a small hut beneath a Bodhi tree, and outside it, seated cross-legged on a flat stone, was the sage. No guards, no roof over his head, no possessions, just stillness, and eyes that did not flicker when the king approached. "You are the one they speak of?" the king asked. The sage nodded once. "I am one, of many." The king studied him. "You have no palace, no army, no throne, and yet people speak your name in reverence. Why?" The sage said nothing. The silence stretched, long enough for the king to feel his own voice echo. Finally, the sage opened his palm and motioned for the king to sit. The king hesitated, then obeyed. They sat together under the tree, as the wind moved gently through the leaves. No words, no commands, just presence. After a long while, the king said, "You are not afraid of me." "I see no king," said the sage, "only a man with questions." The king frowned. "I have conquered lands, broken enemies, shaped history. You think I have questions?" The sage met his eyes. "Then why are you here?" The king opened his mouth, closed it, and looked away. Because beneath the silk, beneath the crowns, beneath the noise, he had come not to test the sage, but to understand something he could not command. Finally he asked, "Why do people follow you?" "I do not ask them to." "Then why do they listen?" The sage picked up a small stone from the earth, rolled it in his fingers. "They listen," he said, "because I have no need for them to." The king blinked. "I lead armies, command cities, hold power over life and death, but still I'm not content." The sage nodded. "Because you mistake fear for respect, obedience for love, wealth for worth. The king stiffened. Are you saying I am not powerful? I am saying, the sage said gently, that true power does not cling, it does not shout, it does not fear being forgotten. They sat again in silence. The wind stirred the sage's robe. The king looked down at his hands. I have everything, he said, but still I feel empty. The sage smiled. Then you are ready. Ready for what? To lead without needing to be above. That evening, the king returned to his palace. No fanfare, no declaration, but something had changed. He began to listen more, to speak less, to ask questions instead of giving orders. His advisors whispered about his visits to temples, his long walks alone, his sudden interest in sitting beneath trees without speaking. And when his generals asked, "Who taught you this?" he said simply, "A man with nothing, who showed me everything." Years later, when the sage passed into silence beneath the same Bodhi tree, the king declared a day of stillness across the land. No work, no speech, just listening. And in time, his own rule became a story of its own, not because he expanded borders, but because he stopped needing to, not because he gained more, but because he learned to let go. And the story of the king and the sage spread like the breeze that once moved through the forest leaves. A reminder that the crown is not the source of power, wisdom is, and the one who does not seek to rule is often the one most worthy to lead. High in the hills above a quiet town there stood a temple. Its walls were weathered by wind and time, its steps worn smooth by generations of sandals, its prayer flags faded but still fluttering, and in its tallest tower hung a bell. Massive, bronze, perfectly cast. It had been gifted by a distant king centuries ago, carried up the mountain by oxen and monks, polished each year, respected, admired, but never rung, not once. The bell had a name, Resonance of the Mountain. Inscribed around its rim were words in a forgotten tongue. It was said to hold the most beautiful sound ever forged, so pure, so deep, that it would quiet all suffering for a moment. But no one had ever heard it, because the abbot long ago had made a vow: let the bell only ring when the world is ready to listen. And so it waited and waited. Pilgrims climbed the hill just to see it. Children dared each other to touch the rope, but none pulled. It became a symbol of restraint, of mystery, of potential, and eventually of silence too deep to question. One day, a novice asked the elder monk, "Why don't we ring it?" The monk shrugged. Because it was meant to be rung, but never was. The novice frowned. Then what's the point of its sound? The monk looked out at the horizon and replied, "You tell me." The story of the bell spread like smoke, and in time, people began to wonder how many other bells go unrung, not made of bronze, but of possibility. There was a painter who never showed her art, a musician who kept every song in his notebook, a teacher who knew how to heal but doubted her voice, a young man who wrote letters he never sent, a woman who forgave but never said the words aloud. Each of them had a bell, hanging in the tower of their own life, polished, admired, imagined, but never heard. This is the parable of unused potential. The Dharma teaches us about impermanence, yes, but also about urgency, not frantic urgency, but gentle, clear truth. This life will not wait forever, and the sound in you deserves to be shared. The bell was never rung, not because it couldn't be, but because someone was waiting for perfect conditions, for absolute certainty, for a sign. But life rarely gives signs, only moments, and you must choose to meet them. There is a Zen story of a man who stands beside a river. He thirsts, but waits for the perfect reflection to appear on the surface before drinking. He dies with water at his feet. What sound do you carry within you? What truth, what offering, what kindness left unsaid, what creation unwritten, what forgiveness unopened? Letting your bell ring does not require a crowd. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be true and shared. One evening, a new abbot arrived at the temple. She had studied the bell's history, had bowed to it many times. And then, one spring morning, as the valley bloomed, she climbed the tower and pulled the rope. The sound that followed was not loud, not shocking, but profound. It rolled through the mountains like a low tide, clear, mournful, joyful, full. Birds rose into the air, monks paused mid-step. Villagers lifted their heads from bowls and windows, and in that moment, everything was still. Not because they heard something new, but because they heard something they had always carried inside. Then the bell was silent again. But something had changed. The abbot later said, "A bell is not meant to be perfect. It is meant to be heard. And so are we." Commentary. This parable asks a quiet but urgent question. What are you holding back? Not out of wisdom, but out of fear. The sound in you may not end suffering. It may not change the world, but it may change a moment. It may reach one person. It may free your own breath, and that is enough. We often wait for permission, for clarity, for mastery, for the right time. But the bell does not ask, "Will I be understood?" It asks, "Will I be true?" The world is filled with unwritten books, unsung songs, unspoken love, unrung bells, and it is not failure to stay silent, but it is loss of what could have been shared, loss of what someone else needed to hear, even if only once. You don't have to shout. You don't have to perform. You just have to let your voice exist, to let the truth you carry move from silence into air. So ring your bell, tell your story, share your art, speak your heart, forgive, laugh, cry, begin again, even if your voice shakes, even if your hands tremble, even if no one claps. Let the sound live outside of you. Let it ripple. Let it go. Because a silent bell may be beautiful, but only a ringing bell is alive. As our exploration of Zen Buddhism deepens, let us listen to a story that reveals how true worth is often overlooked. Here starts the next story. It was the 5th night of the waxing moon. The air in Kapilavastu was still. Not silent, but hushed, as though the stars had gathered at the edges of the world to listen. The palace walls breathed in jasmine and sandalwood. Lamps flickered gently, servants whispered down the halls. And in the royal chamber, Queen Maya of the Shakya clan slept. Her breath moved softly, Her hands rested over her womb, though she did not yet know why. Outside, the moon hung high, full, radiant, unblinking. And beneath that silver light, a dream came to her. Not wild, not fevered, but clear, like water holding the shape of the moon. The dream. She found herself in a quiet grove. It was not the palace, and yet it felt familiar. There were trees, tall and old. Their trunks curved like dancers, their leaves whispering secrets from lifetimes ago. She stood barefoot, wrapped in white. No crown, no jewels, only peace. And above her, the moon glowed brighter than it ever had, a luminous pearl suspended in sky. Then the winds parted, and from the east he came. A white elephant, vast and radiant, walked across the clouds, 6 tusks curved like ivory moons. Each footstep landed without sound, as though the earth bowed beneath him. His eyes were gentle, his ears like lotus petals. His skin shimmered, not with brilliance, but with quiet power. He carried a white lotus in his trunk, and he came to her, not with force, not with haste, but with the serenity of one who knows where he is going. She did not step back. She did not fear. She simply stood and watched. And when he reached her, he bowed, as if to offer the lotus, as if to ask permission. She lowered her gaze, and in that moment, the elephant entered her side. There was no pain, only light, only warmth, as though the moon had moved into her body, as though the entire sky now rested inside her. And in that light, she saw a vision, a child, radiant, seated on a lotus, surrounded by devas and sages, stepping not into royalty, but into destiny. She saw the turning of wheels, the shifting of ages, the crumbling of illusion, and then the dream dissolved. Waking, Maya woke before the birds. The sun had not yet touched the mountains. The oil lamp beside her flickered once, then settled. The chamber was silent, but her hands, still resting over her abdomen, were warm. And her heart beat not with confusion, but with awe. She rose slowly, wrapping herself in soft cloth. She moved through the halls like moonlight and summoned her attendants. "I have seen something," she said. "Call the king, call the sages, call the dream readers and wise ones, bring the astrologers." And they came, with scrolls, with incense, with knowing eyes. She recounted every detail. The forest, the moon, the elephant, the lotus, the peace. They listened, they nodded. And at last, the eldest among them, a man with a voice like woven silk, spoke. "Your dream is not of the ordinary world. It is the sign of a great birth. The child in your womb is no ordinary prince. He will be a Chakravartin, a turner of the wheel. He will change the world. If he remains in the palace, he will become a king of kings. But if he sees the sorrows of the world, he will turn from gold to truth and become a Buddha." The king placed a hand upon her shoulder, not with doubt, but with wonder, because even he, strong, worldly, wise, felt something stirring, something vast, something that had no name yet. The months. As the days passed, The kingdom watched Queen Maya with quiet reverence. Wherever she walked, flowers bloomed slightly earlier. The air around her felt cooler, gentler. Children stopped crying as she passed. Strangers bowed, unsure why. She herself changed. She laughed more easily. She wept with the songs of birds. She dreamed of stars and rivers and ancient trees. She felt the child grow, not just within her body, but as if within the world itself. And one day, near the time of birth, she asked to travel to her ancestral home. It was the tradition of her people, but more than tradition, it was a quiet longing. The king arranged everything, silks and guards, chariots and attendants. But Maya moved simply. She chose only a few companions and rode through forests and open roads beneath a sky filled with soft clouds. The birth. They stopped at Lumbini, a grove of sal trees, green and peaceful. The sun filtered through the canopy. The wind carried the scent of blossoms. Birdsong drifted like prayer. Maya stepped down, drawn to the trees. She held a branch, looked upward, and in that moment, beneath the same moon she had seen in her dream, she gave birth. The child came easily, without struggle, without fear. He did not cry. He simply opened his eyes, wide and calm. And the legends say he took 7 steps, that lotus flowers bloomed beneath each foot, that he raised one hand to the sky and one to the earth and said, "I am born for the benefit of all beings." The attendants wept. The forest fell silent, and the trees, it is said, bowed ever so slightly toward the child. Maya held him to her chest, and though she had seen him in vision, this was different. This was not dream. This was real. The warmth of skin, the weight of life, the beginning of something vast and quiet and beautiful. She did not live long after the birth. Some say it was destiny. That one who gives birth to a Buddha must return to the heavens. That her role was complete. Others say she became a guiding spirit, watching over him from a celestial realm, offering protection in moments when the path turned dark. But her presence never vanished. The child, Siddhartha, would one day walk away from his palace, would one day sit beneath a tree and awaken, would one day teach the world how to end suffering. But it began here, with a dream, with a white elephant, with a moonlit vow whispered across the veil of sleep, and with a mother who said yes, because every journey begins before we can name it. Every great awakening begins in the quiet, and sometimes the first step toward truth is a dream. Every morning, just before dawn, he sat at the corner of Main and River, cross-legged, still, wrapped in an old grey coat with no buttons. People called him the homeless monk. No one knew his real name. No one remembered when he'd first appeared. But he was always there, rain or shine, winter or summer. Sitting silently beneath the faded mural of a rising sun. He never asked for money, never held a sign, just a small tin bowl at his side. Sometimes people dropped coins into it, sometimes fruit, sometimes nothing at all. He never seemed to mind. Children were the first to notice him. "Is he sleeping?" one asked. "No," said her mother. "He's meditating, I think." And the child, with all the clarity of someone who hasn't yet forgotten how to see, replied, He looks like he's listening to the whole city breathe. One barista left him a scone each Wednesday. A florist once placed a single lily in his bowl. An accountant gave him a scarf one January dash, which he later passed on to someone colder than he was. Some scoffed. "He's just lazy," said a man in a BMW. "He's just weird," muttered a teen with earbuds in. But others stopped, only for a second. But they did, because something in his stillness felt like a mirror. One afternoon, a reporter tried to interview him, held out a microphone, asked for his name, his background, his reason. The man opened one eye, smiled gently, and said, "I own nothing, but I belong to everything." Then closed his eye again. The story never aired. Too quiet. Too strange. No hook. But those who paid attention began to notice something. Around him, time slowed. Not literally, but in his presence, people put away their phones, looked up, paused. The world, so hungry for more, seemed to forget itself. For just a moment, there's a teaching in Buddhism. To renounce is not to lose, but to see clearly what you never needed. Some thought he had lost everything, a job, a home, maybe his mind. But maybe he had simply let go of identity, of striving, of the illusion that fulfillment lies in accumulation. One day, a man in a suit stopped and asked, "Don't you want something more?" The monk opened both eyes this time. "I already have it," he said. "What's that?" "A clear sky, a passing breeze, and no hunger in my mind." He didn't preach, didn't convert, but every day his presence was a sermon without words, a reminder that peace isn't a destination. It's a decision. Then one morning he was gone. No note, no trail. Just the faint indentation where he used to sit. The mural behind him had faded a bit more, but someone had drawn a small lotus in chalk right where his bowl used to be. The barista still leaves a scone each Wednesday. The florist still visits. And the accountant, now retired, says he meditates by that wall, not to become something new, but to remember who he was before the noise. And in that city, on that street, somewhere between the rush and the silence, a memory breathes, a man who owned nothing, but gave everything by simply being still. The monsoon rains had passed, and the forest paths of Kosambi steamed with quiet life. Leaves dripped with silver beads. Frogs croaked low from the shadows. And above it all, the scent of wet bark and jasmine lingered like breath held too long. Under a canopy of tall sal trees, the Buddha sat surrounded by monks. They had walked for days to gather here. Some were old, most were young. Their robes still crisp from devotion, their minds still sharp with questions. And today, the Blessed One had agreed to speak, not of morality, nor of meditation, but of something far subtler, of misunderstanding. He began, not with pronouncement, but with silence. Then, as the breeze shifted through the trees, he spoke. "There are those," he said, "who come to the Dharma like a man searching for a serpent." A few monks glanced up. Serpents were no small matter in these woods, slender and swift, some deadly, some divine. "This man," the Buddha continued, "is told that a snake dwells near the roots of a great tree, so he goes into the forest to catch it. But he does not learn the proper way. He does not bring a forked stick. He does not wait for the right moment. He sees movement in the grass and lunges with bare hands. A few younger monks leaned forward. "What happens?" one whispered. The Buddha's gaze passed over them like moonlight on water. He seizes the snake by the tail. A ripple of discomfort passed through the listeners. "And the snake," he said, "twists and strikes." He paused. "And so it is with those who take hold of the Dharma wrongly, grasping at the tail, not understanding the nature of what they hold. And when it turns against them, they blame the teaching, never seeing that it was their own hand that erred." Silence fell again. It was not a parable to soothe, but to stir. For many in that circle had studied hard, memorized discourses, debated with pride. They recited verses in the marketplace, corrected others in the villages, and took satisfaction in knowing the words of the Buddha by heart. But the words were not the snake, and the Buddha knew it. A senior monk, Kakana, bowed his head and asked softly, "Blessed One, how does one hold the Dharma correctly?" The Buddha nodded. "Imagine," he said, "a man crossing a river. The current is swift, the far bank promises safety, and he finds no boat, no bridge, so he gathers branches, grass, and reeds. He binds them tightly. He makes a raft." The monks followed, some nodding. With effort, he crosses the water. And when he reaches the other shore, does he carry the raft on his back for the rest of the journey? A few smiled. A few looked unsure. "No," said the Buddha. "He leaves it behind, grateful, respectful, but he does not cling to it. He let that image hang in the warm, moist air. So too is the Dharma," he said, "a raft to cross, not a burden to bear forever, not a weapon to strike others, not a badge to wear." A soft murmur of recognition passed through the monks. "But some," he continued, "treat the Dharma as the man who grabs the snake's tail. They take hold of words, of verses, of rules, not to cross the river, but to shout from the shore." He turned his palm upward. "They say, 'I know,' you do not. They say, 'This is the only way, yours is wrong.' They say, 'I have read, I have memorized, I have mastered.'" He paused. "But what have they understood?" A breeze stirred the forest floor. A leaf spiraled down like a question with no answer. "Understanding," he said, "is not repetition. Wisdom is not memorization, and truth is not a prize to be clutched." He looked at them all. "Do not seize the tail. Learn how the snake moves. Watch, be still, approach with care. Grasp rightly, not to own, but to understand." A young novice, no older than 15, raised his hand timidly. "But Blessed One," he said, "what if one clings to the raft out of reverence, out of gratitude?" The Buddha smiled gently. "Reverence is not the same as attachment," he said. "Gratitude flows like a river. Clinging dams the stream." He folded his hands in his lap. "To let go does not mean to forget. It means to honor the purpose and move on when it has been fulfilled." Several monks bowed. Some looked thoughtful, others uneasy, for the teaching had pierced the pride of many. A monk named Sati, known for his keen memory and rigid interpretations, frowned. "But Lord," he said, "should we not defend the Dharma from false views?" "Yes," said the Buddha without hesitation. "But first, defend it from misunderstanding within yourself. A man who argues from ego may win the debate and lose the path." He looked directly at Sati. "If you know a verse, but use it to shame another, you have caught the tail." He turned to the group once more. "If you teach to elevate yourself, you have caught the tail. If you study only to be praised, you have caught the tail. If you hold to rules to feel superior, you have caught the tail. And if you mistake knowledge for wisdom, you have caught the tail." The forest was utterly still now. Even the birds had quieted. "And when the snake turns and bites," the Buddha asked, "you will say the Dharma is false, that it failed you, that it was sharp, cruel, or useless, but the snake was never to blame." A few monks bowed their heads in shame. One of the older mendicants, seated on a mat of grass near the front, exhaled deeply. "I have clutched many tails in my time," he said, "but now I wish only to learn how to see clearly." The Buddha nodded. "That is the beginning of wisdom." That evening, as twilight turned the forest gold, the monks moved quietly through the camp. No chants, no debates, just footsteps and thought. Sati sat alone by the fire, his manuscript scrolls untouched. The novice who had asked about the raft sat beside him, quiet, respectful. Sati turned and whispered, "I used to think that knowing every word would make me wise." The boy looked at him. "And now?" Sati stared at the flames. "Now I wonder if I even know how to listen." In the stillness of the forest, the words of the Buddha echoed like a distant bell. "Do not grasp the tail, learn how the snake moves." And in the hearts of those who truly listened, the Dharma shed its scales of pride, of certainty, of rigid form, and began, at last, to breathe. Continuing along the path of Zen insight, we pause now to hear a teaching about perception and hidden value. Listen carefully to the next story. She never meant harm. She only passed on what she heard. A whispered comment here, a raised eyebrow there. A half-finished sentence passed along like a secret prayer. Her name was Sister Nima, young, lively, kind mostly, but her words moved quickly and quietly unraveled the thread of trust inside the temple. At first it was small. She meditates longer when people are watching. They say the head cook isn't really vegetarian. I heard the abbot used to be married. No malice, just conversation, just sharing. But soon, monks began to turn away from each other in the corridor. Silent meals grew tenser. Chanting lost its rhythm. Smiles stiffened at the edges. No one named the cause, but it lingered, like smoke with no fire. One afternoon, the abbot asked Sister Nima to join him in the garden. The plum trees were beginning to blossom, delicate petals stirring in the breeze. He held a small bag in his hand. "Walk with me," he said gently. They walked in silence down the path that circled the temple grounds. After a while, he opened the bag and began to scatter chicken feathers along the way. Sister Nima tilted her head. "Why are you doing that?" The abbot didn't answer. When they returned to the garden, he handed her the empty bag. "Now," he said, "go and collect them all." She blinked. But the wind's taken them. They're scattered everywhere. He looked at her and said softly, "So too with your words." That night she wept. This is the story of speech and consequence, of how sound can build or destroy. Commentary. In Buddhist practice, right speech is one of the Eightfold Path's pillars. It sounds simple, but it is one of the hardest, because words don't vanish when we stop speaking. They ripple, they stain, they take root in someone else's mind, sometimes forever. Sister Nima did not speak with cruelty, but neither did she speak with care. And in that space, in the absence of intention, harm took hold. We often forget how powerful language is. A word can lift someone from despair or push them over the edge. It can invite reflection or ignite shame. Words are not just air. They are actions. They build worlds. There's a Zen saying, "Speak only if it improves upon the silence." Sister Nima filled silence with curiosity, suspicion, drama, and the silence grew quieter, but colder, until no one trusted what they didn't hear. The Buddha once said, "A person is not wise because they speak much. A person is wise when they speak what is true and what causes no harm." That is the gate of right speech. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If it fails even one, it's better to let it drift away like a feather on the wind. After that night, Sister Nima changed. She stopped repeating what others said. She listened more, spoke less. When she did speak, her words came slowly, like water poured from a clean bowl. The monks began to look at her differently, not because she had become wise overnight, but because she was watching herself now, watching what she left behind in others when she spoke. And over time, trust returned to the temple. Not because of a sermon, not because of a rule, but because one person saw the feathers scatter and chose to stop scattering more. So speak with care. Speak like you're building something with your breath. Because you are. Every sentence is a seed, and whether it blooms or bruises is up to you. A novice had a restless mind. He tried to sit, tried to breathe, tried to still the thoughts, but each time he closed his eyes, his mind swirled. Lists, regrets, what ifs, what nexts. He couldn't find peace, and the more he tried to force stillness, the louder everything seemed to become. One morning, after failing again to meditate, he stood up in frustration. "I'm broken," he muttered, and he walked, head down, steps fast, until he nearly collided with the old groundskeeper, Master Rio. Rio was known for his silence. He didn't teach. He didn't lecture. He just tended the gardens and cleaned the gutters. But he had been at the temple longer than anyone. The novice bowed clumsily. "Forgive me, Master." Rio tilted his head, studying him. "You're not breathing like a monk," he said. The novice looked up, startled. Rio turned, motioning for him to follow. They walked in silence through the bamboo grove to the kitchen courtyard, where a wide clay bowl stood filled with clear water. "Sit," Rio said. The novice sat. Rio picked up a small stick, and without a word, he stirred the water, gently at first, then faster, until the surface churned and the reflection broke into chaos. The novice watched. Then Rio set the stick down. They sat in silence. The bowl shimmered, then slowed, then stilled. The novice could suddenly see his own face again in the reflection. Rio looked at him and asked, "Did I make the water still?" The novice blinked. "Number it settled by itself." Rio nodded. "So will your mind." And he walked away. This is the story of trusting the stillness beneath disturbance. Commentary. Many people believe meditation is about forcing silence, forcing peace, erasing all thought. But in truth, it is about letting the water settle. Your mind is like a bowl of clear water. Every thought, every worry, every fear is like a stick stirring it. The more you react, the more you stir. The more you chase silence, the more turbulence you create. But if you sit and breathe and wait without judgment, the water begins to settle on its own. This is the natural wisdom of the mind. You don't need to fix it. You need to allow it. There's a Zen saying, "Muddy water clears itself if left alone." The novice learned something that day, not from a sutra, not from a formal teaching, but from water. He stopped fighting his thoughts. Instead, he watched them. Like leaves drifting across a pond. He stopped demanding they leave, and instead bowed as they passed. And slowly, something began to shift, not instantly, but gently, like the bowl that stopped churning the moment no hand stirred it. This is how peace comes. Not by control, not by perfection, but by patience, by the quiet knowing that nothing stirred stays stirred forever. If you are anxious, sit like the bowl. If you are overwhelmed, breathe like the wind that forgets itself. If you are angry, wait like the pond after rain. It will pass, all of it. And when it does, clarity returns. You'll see your reflection again. Not because you forced it, but because you didn't run. So next time you feel lost in thought, don't fix, don't flee, just wait. And let the water be water. He never spoke a word. Not to the monks, not to the villagers, not even when invited to tea by the abbot himself. He simply bowed and walked and bowed again. They called him the silent pilgrim. He had no belongings except a small cloth bag and thick wooden sandals worn smooth from years on the road. His face was weathered by wind and sun. His back slightly bent, not from age, but from reverence. Because every third step, he stopped, placed his palms together, and bowed to the earth. Step, step, bow. Step, step, bow. He traveled like this for hundreds of miles, through rice paddies and dusty plains, through mountain passes and city streets, through cold rain, sharp sun, and falling snow. He never begged, never asked, never preached, only bowed. When he reached the gates of a remote temple high in the hills, a monk ran inside to announce, "The pilgrim has come." Curious, the monks gathered. Some stood with folded arms. Others watched from the steps. One scoffed, "What is this? A show?" Another whispered, "Surely he must be seeking merit or praise." But the abbot only smiled. "Wait, watch." The pilgrim reached the stone path before the temple gate. Step, step, bow. His palms touched the gravel. His forehead met the earth. He rose slowly and continued. All morning he bowed up the path. By noon he had reached the courtyard. The air was silent, except for the soft crunch of gravel and the long breath between bows. Step, step, bow. By evening, he reached the base of the temple steps. He did not climb them. Instead, he bowed once more, then turned, and began his journey down the mountain. Step, step, bow. The monks were stunned. He never entered. He never asked to stay. He came all this way just to bow. The abbot nodded. And in bowing, he entered more deeply than any of us. This is the story of wordless devotion, of practice not performed, but lived in the marrow of each step. Commentary. In the West, we often think wisdom must be spoken. That truth arrives in grand lectures, eloquent teachings, powerful arguments. But sometimes the greatest teachings are silent. The silent pilgrim did not explain his path. He became it. With each bow, he gave himself to the moment, to humility, to gratitude, to presence. He bowed not to worship the earth, but to remember he belonged to it. In Buddhism, we bow not out of subservience. We bow to let go of the self, to surrender ego, to honor interbeing. The sky does not rise without the sun. The tree does not grow without the soil. You do not breathe without the generosity of everything around you. To bow is to remember that. The pilgrim didn't need a teacher. Every grain of dust was his teacher. Every blister, his scripture. Every bow, a verse in the sutra of the path. He asked for nothing, judged no one, corrected no teachings. He gave only his body, his time, his breath. That was his offering. That was his sermon. One monk, deeply moved, asked the abbot, "Should I walk like that? Bow like that?" The abbot said, "Not unless your heart is already bowing. It's not about copying the form. It's about sincerity. Some bow with their bodies and judge with their minds. Others bow with their actions and remain upright inside. But true bowing begins within. It is a quiet crumbling of pride, a surrender of the need to be seen, a softening into the now. There is a Zen phrase, "The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences." The silent pilgrim had no preference for praise or obscurity, for arrival or delay. His goal was not the temple. His goal was the bow itself. Step, step, bow. Again and again, until there was no one left doing it. Only the gesture, only the giving, only the way. Wherever you are, whoever you are, you can bow too, not just with your body, but with how you listen, with how you wait, how you serve, how you show up for the dust on the floor or the silence in a friend's eyes. To bow is to soften, to slow, to remember what matters, and sometimes to say everything without a single word. As we drift deeper into the still waters of Zen, a quiet teaching begins to rise, one that speaks of clarity and of value not always seen. Listen gently now. The next story begins. The wind in Lumbini moved gently, like breath held between two worlds. It was spring. The trees were in bloom, and the sal branches swayed with the weight of 1,000 white blossoms, drifting like snow through sunlight. The grove itself had always been sacred, but on this day, it held its breath. because something was about to happen. Queen Maya of Kapilavastu had travelled far. Her time was near, and by custom, she had chosen to give birth in her family's village. The journey had been long, but gentle. Attendants walked quietly beside her. The sky stayed clear, and the earth itself seemed to soften beneath their steps. When they reached Lumbini, Maya smiled. Here, the air was different, cooler, still. The light filtered through the trees in beams so soft they looked like silk. She stepped down from her carriage, removed her sandals, and walked barefoot into the grove. Birds did not flee. They simply paused. At the center of the grove stood a tall sal tree, wide-branched and flowering. She reached for a low branch and rested her hand upon it. She did not cry out. She did not tremble. She breathed. And there, beneath the trees upon the earth in silence, a child was born. He did not enter with a cry. He entered with awareness. His eyes opened wide, dark and deep like the night before rain. His skin was said to shine with a glow not of this world, and the breeze, once soft, began to stir the leaves as if to sing. Attendants rushed forward. The midwife covered her mouth. The sky turned golden for a breath, and legend says that the flowers on the sal tree bent low to witness. The child did not wait to be carried. He stood. He took 7 steps, and with each step, where his foot touched the ground, a lotus bloomed. Not imagined, not metaphor, but real. Petals unfurled beneath his heels. Fragrance filled the air, and the world paused. Animals stopped their grazing, streams paused their song, and even the wind, surprised by the holiness of the moment, turned back to watch. When the 7th step was taken, the boy raised one hand to the sky and one to the earth. And in a voice that was not learned but remembered, he said, "In this life, I am born for the benefit of all beings. This is my final birth. I will put an end to suffering." It is said that the Devas, gods of distant realms, gathered in silence, their hands folded, their eyes lowered, because something rare had occurred. A bodhisattva, fully awakened in past lives, had returned to walk the earth once more. Heavenly flowers fell through the air. Trumpets sounded without instruments. Celestial beings whispered blessings the humans could not hear. And yet even those on earth, who had no names for such wonders, felt the shift. One man wept without knowing why. One horse knelt in its harness. A pot of rice boiled over though no fire was lit. Something had entered the world, something ancient, and entirely new. He was named Siddhartha, which means he who achieves his aim. In his small face, those who looked closely saw both softness and strength, an ocean of stillness behind the movements of a child. He did not laugh more or cry less than other babies, but when he looked into your eyes, it felt as though he saw through the lifetimes you had forgotten. Queen Maya held him close, felt his heartbeat against her own, but in her heart she knew this child did not belong only to her. He belonged to the world. Word of the birth travelled quickly. When the child was only days old, the king summoned the wise sages of the land. Among them came Asita, an old hermit who lived in the mountains, wrapped in robes the colour of ash, with eyes that had watched the turning of many seasons. He entered the palace slowly, carried no staff, asked no favor. He only asked to see the child. When Siddhartha was placed before him, Asita's lips trembled. Tears welled in his eyes, not from sorrow, but from recognition. He bowed low before the infant. And when he rose, he turned to the king. "This child will not rule a kingdom. He will rule the heart. He will not wield armies. He will end suffering. He is destined to become a Buddha, an awakened one. He will show the way beyond sorrow. But I will not live to see his teaching. That is my only sadness." And he bowed once more. The room fell still. Even the oil lamps seemed to lean closer. The king said nothing. The queen held her son more tightly. Maya did not live long after the birth. Some say it was her karma to return to the celestial realm, that to carry a Buddha is to carry a world, and some bodies are made only to hold such grace for a little while. Others say she became his guardian spirit, that she watched from beyond the veil, her presence in every breeze that cooled his fever, every bird that sang outside his window. Siddhartha was raised by her sister. He grew in the lap of comfort. But the memory of the grove, the trees, the moonlit dream, those lived on. Years later, when Siddhartha became the Buddha, he never spoke often of his birth. He taught of suffering, of the path, of breath, of impermanence. But once, when asked what it meant that he had walked on lotus blossoms, he smiled and said, "The path was already beneath me. I did not make it appear. I only stepped where it had always been. Because truth is not invented, it is remembered." Like petals underfoot, waiting to be noticed. And so the child who walked on lotus blossoms became the man who taught others to walk in peace. One step, then another, until suffering too began to bloom into wisdom. The young monk spoke with confidence. He had studied for years. He had memorized the sutras, debated the Dharma, written essays on emptiness and non-self. Now he stood before Master Obaku, hoping to impress him. "What is the ultimate truth of Buddhism?" he asked, bowing low. The question was polished, prepared, even reverent. But Obaku said nothing. Instead, he stepped forward and shouted, loud, sudden, like thunder cracking a still lake. The monk stumbled backward, heart racing. His thoughts vanished. His pride scattered like startled birds. And for a moment, just one brief, breathless moment, his mind stopped. No questions, no answers. Just space, raw and awake. That was the lesson. A shout. Not of anger, but of compassion. Not to belittle, but to break. To shatter the walls of thinking that separate seeker from truth. In the Zen tradition, this is known as katsu, a fierce cry. A single wordless eruption that pierces through the mind's constant noise. Obaku used it like a blade, not to wound, but to cut away illusion, to jolt the student out of the fog of thought. Because sometimes you don't need more understanding, you need a wake-up call. Think of a dream. You're walking through it, believing it, responding to it. Then someone shouts your name, you jolt awake, and realize none of it was real. Obaku's shout was like that, not a teaching, a waking. Years later, the monk returned. He bowed before Obaku and said, "I finally understand why you shouted." Obaku smiled and said, "Then forget that I ever did." because even the memory of awakening can become another concept, another prison. Zen cuts not just through delusion, but through the attachment to insight itself. Obaku was a teacher of few words, but when he spoke or shouted, he struck deep. Once another student asked him, "What is the path to liberation?" Obaku raised his fist. The student said nothing, then bowed, because in that moment he understood. The path was this: not words about liberation, but the raw, silent, direct presence of the fist before him. Western minds often recoil from this. We're trained to expect kindness to be soft, truth to be calm, teachers to be gentle. But in Zen, compassion doesn't always whisper. Sometimes it roars, because the cage of the thinking mind is strong, and it takes a powerful noise to break it. Obaku's shout was not personal, it was not performance. It was pure action, free from hesitation, free from agenda. A sound that came from no self, and landed in the heart like a bell. Another story is told. A monk was dozing off during meditation. Obaku walked behind him, raised his staff, and struck the ground beside him, hard. The monk jolted upright, eyes wide. The master said only, "If you sleep through life, you will dream of Zen, but never wake to it." The monk bowed. He never fell asleep in the hall again. These moments are not cruel. They are kindness without comfort, because comfort can lull us into dreaming. But Zen is the practice of waking, again and again, until waking becomes your natural state, until presence is all you need. Imagine someone drowning in shallow water. You don't throw them a book about swimming. You pull them up, sometimes roughly, but always with love. That is Obaku's shout, a hand reaching through illusion, grabbing you by the robe and saying, "Wake up." Commentary. Not all teachings arrive gently. Some arrive like a storm, like cold water to the face, like a sound so loud it shakes the thoughts out of your spine. Because truth is not fragile. It doesn't need to be whispered. It just needs to be heard. And often the most compassionate thing a teacher can do is stop trying to explain and simply interrupt. Interrupt the story. Interrupt the me. Interrupt the years of polite ego dressed up as spirituality. Obaku knew this. He wasn't teaching Buddhism, he was teaching freedom. And sometimes freedom begins not with understanding, but with a single sharp, sacred shout. If you walk away from Zen with nothing but quotes, you've missed it. If you remember the stories but never felt the cut, you're still dreaming. But if something within you, some soft center you didn't know you had, felt this story not as words, but as thunder, then maybe, just maybe, you've begun to wake up. The morning mist curled like breath above the water. Dew clung to each blade of grass, and the banyan trees stood tall and patient, their thick roots like ancient hands gripping the earth. In this quiet forest, life stirred slowly. A family of parakeets stretched their wings. Wildflowers opened their sleepy faces to the sun, and by the bend of a river, beneath the shade of a great banyan tree, grazed a herd of deer. Their leader was not the strongest in muscle, nor the swiftest in hoof, but in his eyes was a calm that held the wisdom of many lifetimes. He was the Buddha in a past life, and he was known as the banyan deer. He led not with fear, but with gentleness. When predators lurked, he guided the herd with silence and grace. When floods came, he taught them how to move with the water, not against it. And when food was scarce, he gave the youngest and oldest the first share. Even the wind seemed to part for him. But harmony rarely goes unnoticed for long. Not far beyond the forest, a new king had risen. Young, proud, hungry for grandeur. One morning, as he bathed in a river near the forest edge, a golden mango floated past. He took a bite and paused. The taste was unlike any fruit he had ever known, honeyed, rich, alive. "Where did this come from?" he asked. A servant replied, "From deep in the forest, sire, a grove the deer protect." The king stood. "Then I must have it." With drums and banners, he marched into the trees. His men cleared paths, felled smaller growth, and drove the deer into a vast enclosed reserve. The mango tree was surrounded, the forest taken. The deer were trapped. To amuse himself, the king began a game. Each day, a deer would be chosen to die, for his hunt, for his table, for sport. The deer grew restless. Mothers wept. Fawns shivered in the tall grass. Panic spread like fire. But the banyan deer did not run. He stepped forward and bowed before the king. "Great ruler," he said softly, "let there be order to our suffering. We will offer one deer each day, willing, calm, so the others may live in peace." The king, amused, agreed. A list was drawn. 1 deer per day, alternating between herds. No chase, no screams, just quiet death. And so it went. Until one morning, a young doe was chosen. She was from another herd, led by a different chief. But when her turn came, she did not arrive alone. She brought her fawn, still wobbling on its legs, eyes wide, breath quick with fear. The doe knelt before the banyan deer. "I do not come to beg for myself," she said, "but for my child. He cannot feed without me. He cannot yet graze. If I die today, he dies too." She lowered her head. "I ask not for escape, only for time. Let another go in my place, just until he learns to eat." The banyan deer looked at her, then at the fawn, then at the sky, and without a word he turned, walked to the river's edge, and stepped onto the path that led to the palace. The guards, now familiar with his presence, let him pass. The king sat on his marble seat, polishing the tip of his spear. "You again," he said. "What is it now?" The banyan deer bowed low. "I come to take her place." The king raised an eyebrow. "She is not from your herd." "I know." "She is not your responsibility." "She is a mother." The king laughed. "Then let her king speak for her." He did not. "And why you?" "Because I can." A silence fell between them. The king studied the deer, the steady breath, the lowered gaze, the quiet strength. "You would give your life for a stranger." "I do not see strangers," said the deer. "Only lives, only suffering, only the chance to spare it." The king leaned back. "Tell me, banyan deer, are you not afraid?" The deer looked up, calm as still water. "I am not afraid to die. I am only afraid to forget compassion." Something shifted in the room. a hush deeper than silence. The king stood, and for the first time in many days, he put down his spear. "No more," he said. "No more blood, no more names drawn, no more quiet lines of sacrifice." He turned to his guards. "Let them go. All of them." That evening, the forest rang with a sound it had not heard in weeks. Joy. Deer ran free beneath the banyan branches. Mothers called their young. The wind moved through the trees without the scent of fear. And at the center of it all stood the banyan deer, watching not with pride, but with peace. In years to come, the king would be remembered as one who changed, not through conquest, but through listening. He had come for mangoes and left with something far sweeter. And the deer who gave up his place without hesitation, he would live on in paintings, in prayers, in stories whispered to children before sleep. Not because he was noble, but because he saw no difference between himself and the one who wept. Because real compassion does not ask, "Is this my problem?" It says, "If it hurts you, it touches me." And in that truth, we are all the same. With each breath, we continue our journey through the wisdom of Zen, where the smallest stone may hold the greatest truth. Here starts the next story. In a small temple nestled between pine trees and fog, there burned a single candle. It was placed each morning in the center of the meditation hall. No glass shield, no tall holder, just a quiet flame in a shallow dish. It flickered gently as monks came and went. It was not large, not dazzling, but it was always there. Software steady, alive. One morning, a gust of wind swept through the open window. The flame bent low, danced wildly, then steadied, then bent again. A novice sitting nearby grew anxious. He reached to close the window, but the old teacher touched his arm and whispered, "Wait, let it breathe." The flame, though small, did not go out. It fluttered, dimmed, but held on. The room stayed still, and after a few moments the wind passed. The candle straightened, its glow calm once more. The teacher turned to the novice and said, "This is your mind. This is your breath. This is your life." A candle by nature is vulnerable. One sharp breath, and it's gone. One careless movement, and it's lost. But that fragility is also its power, because the candle doesn't resist the wind. It doesn't fight to stay lit. It simply responds, bows, sways, returns. In Buddhism, the flame is often used as a metaphor for consciousness, flickering, ever-changing, not a solid thing, but a process, a dance between wick, wax, and air. Your thoughts are like the flame, your body, the wick, your breath, the air that sustains it, and the wind. That's life. The candle cannot control the wind, but it learns to dance with it. And that is the teaching. The novice asked, "But what if the flame goes out?" The teacher smiled. "Then we light it again, and again, and again. This is the practice. You will lose your calm. You will be shaken. Your light will dim, but the wick is still there. The wax remains. You are never without the capacity to be rekindled. There is a Tibetan saying, 'Better to light a single candle than to curse the darkness.' But even deeper is this. Learn to trust the candle even when the wind rises." In the days that followed, The novice watched the flame more closely. He began to notice how it moved, how it bent without fear, how it never clung to its shape from a moment before. And one morning, during Zazen, as a storm passed outside, he did not flinch. He simply watched the flame bend and return. And in that moment, something in him softened too. This is what meditation teaches, not how to still the wind, but how to let the flame bend without going out, how to meet life's changes with grace, how to stop fearing your own flicker. Grief is a wind, so is joy, so is anger, so is love. You cannot block the breeze without also losing the air you need to burn. You must stay open, even when it stings. Especially then, commentary. The Candle and the Wind is not a story about fragility alone. It's about resilience without resistance. It's about remaining warm, soft, and lit, even when the conditions shift. Even when nothing stays steady but your own willingness to begin again. We often think strength looks like staying the same. But sometimes strength is in swaying, in letting go, in trusting that the flame inside you is not so easily put out. You do not need to burn like a bonfire. You only need to glow enough to see your next step, to offer light to the person beside you, to remind the darkness, I am still here. The teacher once said, a candle gives all it has, and still the world is warmed by its passing. So be the candle. Even if your light flickers, even if no one sees, even if the wind blows harder tomorrow, burn anyway, not for show, but because this is who you are. A fisherman rose each morning before dawn. He lived at the edge of a still bay, where mist rolled in like a soft breath and the world moved slowly. Each day, he cast his net into the water. Not with force, not with haste, just one gentle sweep into the unknown. Sometimes the catch was good. Other times, the net came up nearly empty. But he never cursed the sea. He simply folded the net, sat quietly by the shore, and waited for light. One morning, as he gathered the net, he noticed something strange. Tangled in the threads was not a fish, but a stone. Smooth, dark, heavy. He tried to shake it loose, but it wouldn't budge. So he tugged, pulled, cut a thread. But the more he worked, the more tangled the net became. What once was open and fluid now clung to itself in knots. The sun rose, the tide shifted, and the fisherman sat with his hands full of threads and tension. A monk walking nearby saw him and paused. She watched for a while, then sat beside him. They sat in silence. Then she asked, "Why are you still holding the stone?" The fisherman looked down, surprised. "I don't know," he said. "It was just there. I didn't ask for it, but now I can't let go." The monk nodded slowly, then said, "The mind is like your net, and thoughts are like what it catches. Some nourish us, some weigh us down. The skill is not in holding tighter, the skill is in knowing when to let go." The fisherman blinked. He looked at the stone again, noticed its weight, its stillness, and then, without force, he simply opened his hand. The stone dropped, and in the silence that followed, the net softened. This is the teaching. The mind is always casting, always sweeping the depths of the world, and each moment, it brings something up. A memory, a judgment, a craving, a fear, a plan, a worry. You didn't ask for it, but it's there. And what you do next is the practice. In meditation, you begin to notice the stones. You sit quietly and the mind casts its net. Up come thoughts, endless, streaming. Some small and harmless, some sticky and sharp, some heavy and loud, and the habit is to grab them, to pull them closer, to replay the argument, to solve the unsolvable, to panic over the future, to narrate the self. But the teaching is simple. Open your hand, let it drop, return to the breath, again and again. This is not avoidance. It is freedom. It is not denial. It is discernment. Because not every thought deserves your grip. Some are just passing fish, some are driftwood, and some are stones that were never yours to carry. The mind wants to collect, wants to store, wants to turn everything into me and mine. But the Dharma says, there is no need to fill your net with every thought. Let the sea give and take. Let the net remain open. Let stillness return. There is a Zen saying, let your thoughts come and go like clouds in the sky. Do not hold on to any of them. And another, you cannot stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. The fisherman became a student of this practice. He still rose early, still cast his net, but he no longer feared the weight of unwanted things. He had learned to pause, to breathe, to release. One day, another fisherman asked him, "Why do you never struggle anymore?" And he replied, "Because I stopped thinking the stone had to be mine." Commentary. The mind is a marvel, but also a trickster. It offers thoughts like a street vendor offering wares. Here, it says, worry about this. Remember this insult. Fear this loss. Fix this person. Solve this world. You don't need to buy everything it sells. You can say, "Not today," and return to the silence underneath. This parable teaches non-attachment to thought, not by suppression, but by seeing clearly, this is just a stone. It came up in my net, and now I let it go. Sometimes you'll catch a golden truth, a loving memory, a calm realization. Hold it gently and let it go too, because even beauty becomes burden when clutched too long. In the end, all thoughts pass, like tides, like clouds, like weather across the sky of mind. You are not the net, you are not the catch, you are the sea. And the stillness beneath. The midday sun beat down on the monastery grounds, turning the stone paths warm beneath bare feet. A hush lingered under the mango trees, broken only by the soft sweep of a broom or the distant cry of a minor bird. Somewhere in the distance, a pot clinked gently on a washstone. It was the kind of afternoon that invited stillness. Under the spreading shade of a sala tree, the Buddha sat. His robes were folded neatly, his spine straight yet effortless, his gaze lowered, not in sleep or withdrawal, but in alert peace, like the surface of a quiet pond. From the southern walkway came Malanka, a young monk with a troubled brow. He had once been praised for his intellect, admired for the sharpness of his reasoning. But in recent months, that sharpness had turned inward. Each meditation left him with more questions than silence. He dreamed of stars, of time looping backward, of endless rebirths and impossible beginnings. He had filled scrolls with inquiries. He debated with scholars until his throat ached. But peace never came. And so today, he came to the Buddha. He bowed low. "Blessed One," he said, "I have questions." The Buddha did not speak immediately, but his silence was not dismissive. It was a space, an invitation. Malunka hesitated, then stepped forward. "Is the universe eternal?" he asked. "Is it infinite? Will a Buddha exist after death or vanish like smoke? Is the soul bound or free? Is the world self-created or born of design?" Each question emerged like a stone cast into a well, sharp, fast, echoing. The Buddha remained quiet. Malunka's face tightened. "Why will you not answer me?" he asked. "Are these not worthy questions? Are we not seekers of truth?" The Buddha looked up. His gaze was soft but steady. The other monks nearby paused in their work and drew closer, sensing the moment. The Buddha spoke. "Let me tell you a story. There was once a man," he said, "who was struck by a poisoned arrow in battle. The wound was deep. The poison spread quickly. His friends and family rushed to bring a healer. But the man, gasping, objected. 'Before I allow treatment,' he said, 'I must know who shot me. Was he a nobleman or a laborer? What was his clan? Where was he born? What kind of bow did he use? Long or short? What wood was it carved from? What was the arrow's length? The feathers? Were they peacock or eagle? What poison did he use, and who taught him?' The monks chuckled, some hiding smiles behind folded hands. But the Buddha's gaze didn't waver. While the man demanded these answers, he died. He turned fully toward Malunka. "Would you call that man wise?" Malunka lowered his head, chastened. "No, Blessed One." The Buddha continued, his voice like slow water. "We are each struck by the arrow of suffering, pain, aging, death. The urgent question is not what lies beyond the river, but how to stop the bleeding, how to live with clarity now. We must remove the arrow before the poison spreads too far." Malunka stood in stillness. The breeze lifted the hem of his robe. His hands, once clenched, softened at his sides. "But don't those other questions matter?" he asked. "Aren't they part of the path?" "They may," the Buddha said, "but only after the wound is tended. Theories are branches, but we must first tend to the root. The Dharma is not meant to entertain the mind, it is meant to free it." The young monk exhaled. For years he had studied commentaries, argued with visiting teachers, sought certainty in logic and definition. But now he saw the arrow was still in him, and each speculative thought, each metaphysical obsession, had only twisted it deeper. That night, Malunka did not return to the library. He sat by the monastery's stone well and watched the moon ripple in the water. He did not write. He did not speak. He simply breathed, slowly, honestly. For the first time, he noticed the weight in his chest, not as a puzzle, but as pain. In the morning, he returned to the Buddha. He bowed deeply, forehead touching earth. "Blessed One," he said, "I no longer ask if the universe is eternal. I ask how to meet this moment without fear." The Buddha smiled. That is the first step. And from that moment forward, Malunka's practice changed. He spoke less, listened more. When new monks asked abstract questions, he did not dismiss them. He simply asked, "Is this question healing you or delaying your healing?" Word of the exchange traveled. Soon, the story of the poisoned arrow spread, not as a rebuke of knowledge, but as a reminder of urgency. In a village struck by drought, a farmer mourned his ruined fields. His hands trembled with anger. "Why has fate cursed me?" he asked his neighbors. "Why was I born here and not in richer soil? Who sinned in a past life to bring this?" But then he remembered the story of the arrow. He sat beneath his withered tree and whispered, "How can I help my family now?" And the answer came quietly, "Begin digging a well." In a riverside town, a mother wept for her daughter, taken by fever. She begged the heavens for a sign, wondered what sins she had committed, questioned every past decision. But the village priest, who had once trained as a monk, told her the story. That night, she held her daughter's shawl and lit a lamp in silence, not to understand fate, but to honor love. Elsewhere, a scholar stood before a crowd, reciting theories about the soul's origin and whether consciousness survives death. In the back row, a quiet boy raised his hand. "Sir," he asked, "have you removed your arrow yet?" The crowd fell still. The scholar did not answer. He returned to his room that night and sat without books for the first time in years. The Buddha never forbade questions. He welcomed inquiry. But he offered a compass, not a cage. He simply asked, "Will this question free you? Or bind you? Will it heal your wound? Or distract you from the blade still buried?" That became the measure. And so the monks learned not just what to ask, but when to ask and why, because the arrow is real. The pain is now. The wound is not a theory, and the first task, before philosophy, before argument, before metaphysics, is to pull it out, not later, not after you name the wood, not once you've traced its lineage, but now. The path of Zen unfolds like morning mist, soft and patient. In this next tale, we are invited to see, beyond appearance, into essence. Listen carefully to the next story. In the town of Rajagaha, nestled among ridges of stone and mist, the streets curled like vines through hills and markets. Every morning, as the sun brushed gold across tiled rooftops, the air came alive with the calls of merchants, the ring of temple bells, and the mingling scents of tamarind, burning incense, and warm, sweet rice. Life here was orderly, rhythmic, a blend of mountain silence and city song. But lately, that rhythm had broken, not from plague, not from drought, but from something deeper, more primal. Fear, not fear of armies or kings, but of a creature, Nalagiri, a bull elephant so massive that earth seemed to lean under his step. Captured from the wild mountains of the north, Nalagiri had been kept in the royal stables since he was young. Once a proud spirit, free to roam cliffs and bathe in wild rivers, now he was shackled day after day, year after year. The weight of captivity grew inside him like fire trapped in stone. He grew restless, then bitter, then dangerous. Stable boys quit, guards were replaced, chains grew thicker. Nalagiri's cries echoed through the stone halls like thunder rolling through empty skies. The people of Rajagaha whispered that madness had taken him, but not all feared him. One man saw an opportunity in that rage. Devadatta, the Buddha's cousin, a monk by appearance, but a storm beneath the robes. Jealous of the Buddha's calm, his followers, his truth, Devadatta sought power, not peace. And when his teachings could not rival the Buddha's, he plotted instead. He went to King Ajatashatru, young and proud, his rule still soft around the edges, and he leaned close. "Let Nalagiri loose," he whispered. "Aim him at the Buddha. See what becomes of silent wisdom when tusks meet flesh." The king, tempted by spectacle or swayed by flattery, agreed. And so, one morning, before the city had fully woken, the iron gate to Nalagiri's pen creaked open. Chains were undone. Commands were given. The path was cleared. Nalagiri stepped forward, eyes wide, breath steaming, mind ablaze. He charged through market streets, through cloth stalls and fruit carts, scattering baskets and lives. People screamed. Children ran. Dogs howled and carts overturned. He did not walk. He tore the world open beneath him. And down that path, barefoot, cloaked in saffron robes, carrying only his arm's bowl, walked the Buddha. No guards, no weapons, no rush in his step. Just presence. His disciples shouted from behind walls and corners, "Lord, turn back. The elephant comes. He will crush you." But the Buddha kept walking, not with recklessness, not with pride, but with compassion so still it could hold a mountain. As Nalagiri approached, the air thickened with heat and tension. His tusks gleamed. His trunk coiled like a whip. His roar shattered the morning hush. Mothers shielded their children. Merchants fell to the ground. The entire city held its breath. But the Buddha stood. The elephant thundered toward him. The ground trembled. And then, stillness. The Buddha raised his eyes and looked. He looked not at a beast, not at a weapon, but at a being in pain. He saw the chains, the years, the sorrow turned to rage. He saw the hunger for freedom twisted into madness. He saw a heart once wild, now broken by cruelty. And in his gaze, he held no fear, no judgment, only recognition. As Nalagiri neared, mere strides away from trampling the man before him, he met that gaze, and something changed. The wind quieted, the air cooled. The fire in Nalagiri's eyes flickered. He slowed, then paused. His ears twitched, his breathing hitched. He took one more step, then stopped. The Buddha stepped forward. Slowly, gently, one hand raised, not to strike, not to shield, but to bless. And Nalagiri knelt. He folded his legs beneath him, lowered his head like a branch under rain. A great groan, half sigh, half sorrow, escaped his chest. And there, in the middle of the street where rage had once ruled, the Buddha placed his hand on Nalagiri's brow. Not with domination, but with presence. And the elephant wept. Tears pooled beneath his eyes, streaking down the folds of his face, darkening the dust. His trunk coiled softly around the Buddha's arm, no longer as a weapon, but as a gesture of surrender. The city watched in stunned silence. The same elephant who shattered stone fences and snapped trees now sat like a disciple at the feet of peace. Devadatta, watching from the shadows of a colonnade, said nothing. His plot, like a snake uncoiled, had slithered away, not with defeat by force, but by a truth too gentle to resist. Later, when the sun rose fully and the city slowly exhaled, Nalagiri returned to the royal grounds, but no longer was he led by whip or chain. He walked slowly, willingly, like a monk returning from alms. The Buddha returned to his seat beneath a banyan tree, his bowl untouched, his robe still bright. And the people came. They came not to celebrate a miracle, but to understand a lesson. They asked, "How did you stop him?" And the Buddha replied, "Anger cannot be conquered by anger, but by love alone. Fear cannot be silenced by force, but by understanding. The wildness in others is often the cry of suffering, not wickedness." And so it was taught that true strength is not in the fist, not in the sword, but in the heart that stays open in the face of danger. The tale of Nalagiri passed from lips to scrolls, from scrolls to temples, from temples to time itself. Children would ask their mothers, "Is it true that the Buddha tamed the elephant?" And they would answer, "Yes, my child, but not with magic, with seeing. Seeing the pain in others, seeing the fear beneath fury, seeing the being behind the mask, and meeting it with love." Nalagiri lived out his days not as a beast of burden, but as a gentle giant, offering rides to children, watering temple gardens with his trunk, and standing calmly when the monks recited sutras beneath the trees. It is said that when he died, the earth grieved gently, and his spirit rose unchained. Some believe Nalagiri was reborn in a heavenly realm. Others say he was reborn among the disciples. But all agree on this, that in the still gaze of one awakened man, an ocean of rage was calmed. Not by war, but by peace itself. In a sleek glass building downtown, an elevator rose and fell like breath. It carried suits and heels, coffee cups and clipped conversations, laptops glowing with unread messages. And in it stood Daniel. Crisp tie, polished shoes, phone always in hand. Eyes darting to the floor counter. 17, 18, 19, always up. Daniel worked in mergers and acquisitions. His days were booked in color-coded blocks. 10-minute meetings, lunches at his desk, even bathroom breaks planned with precision. He was good, efficient, respected, and completely unable to rest. The elevator was his chapel, the only place he stood still. And even then, his mind climbed faster than the floors. One day, the elevator stopped between levels. A soft jolt, a mechanical sigh, then stillness. Daniel exhaled, checked the buttons, pressed call, tapped the screen on his phone. No service. He cursed, then waited. 5 seconds, 10, a minute, no motion. Panic started to rise. Not fear of being trapped, but fear of not moving. In that silent steel box, Daniel faced the one thing he avoided: stillness. He looked around, at the brushed metal walls, at his own reflection, tight jaw, shallow breath. For the first time in months, he had no signal, no task, no escape. And slowly, something cracked. Not loudly, just a hairline fracture in the illusion. Daniel slumped slightly, loosened his tie, sat down right there on the elevator floor. He exhaled, long and low. He noticed how loud silence is when you're used to constant motion. He watched the display screen, still frozen at level 19. He chuckled. Of course, 19, almost 20. The next promotion, the next salary tier, the next version of himself. Always almost, never here. The Buddha once asked, if you carry a burden endlessly, does it grow heavier or lighter? The answer is, it becomes you, and you forget you are ever free of it. Daniel didn't move, didn't check the time, didn't plan. He just sat, and after a while, he realized he didn't miss anything. The world outside was still spinning, and yet, in here, there was space. 15 minutes passed, then a voice came through the intercom. Sorry about that, sir. Elevator's back online. A whir, a lurch, and the floor counter resumed its climb. But something in Daniel did not. When the doors opened at 33, he didn't step out. He pressed G, ground floor, and rode all the way back down. No one understood. But for the first time, he didn't care to explain. Presence isn't just stillness. It's not needing to climb when you don't know why you're climbing. The next day, he came to work with a small thermos of tea. No email before 10 a.m. He looked co-workers in the eye, asked how they were, waited for the answer. He still worked hard, still showed up, but something had softened. Something had stopped chasing. Years later, Daniel told a friend, "The best thing I ever did was get stuck." The friend raised an eyebrow. Daniel smiled. I needed the elevator to stop, so I could finally notice. I didn't want the top floor. Climbing isn't wrong, but climbing without pause forgets the view, and sometimes the highest level is the one where you sit down and breathe. The novice stepped forward, eyes low, robes gathered neatly in his arms. He had heard whispers of the great master Joshu, of his clarity, of his presence, of the way his words, brief, sharp, could undo years of illusion in a single moment. And so, the novice came with a question, simple, ancient, and burning. He bowed deeply. Does a dog have Buddha nature? Joshu looked at him, quiet as a still pond, then said, Moo. Just that. One word, moo. The novice blinked. He had expected a teaching, a parable, perhaps even a sermon on interdependence or karma. But all he got was this one syllable, moo. Number not no, as in rejection, but moo, as in as in empty, as in beyond yes or no. The novice opened his mouth to speak again, to clarify, to plead for context. But Joshu had already returned to trimming the bonsai. And the novice was left standing there, holding a question that would not let go. Does a dog have Buddha nature? In the Mahayana tradition, the answer is yes. All beings have Buddha nature, even the smallest ant, even the vilest criminal, even the barking dog on the dusty street. The Heart Sutra says, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. So why did Joshu say moo? It wasn't to contradict the sutras, it was to shock the mind out of seeking answers like stones in a riverbed. For weeks, the novice could not sleep. He replayed the moment again and again. He wrote MU in his journal. He whispered it during walking meditation. He shouted it into the wind. He carried it like a thorn in the foot, every step made sharper by its presence. One night, a senior monk approached him in the meditation hall. "Why do you look so troubled?" he asked. The novice bowed his head. "Master Joshu gave me a koan. Does a dog have Buddha nature?" He said. "Moo! I don't understand." The monk smiled gently. "You won't." "Not yet." The novice frowned. "Then what should I do?" "Burn your logic," said the monk, "and sit." In the centuries that followed, Joshu's Mu became the first koan in the Gateless Gate, a collection of paradoxical encounters meant to tear open the mind. And it is said that some monks meditated on Mu for 5 years, 10, even 20. Not because the question was hard, but because the answer required the death of the one asking it. Mu is not a word, it is a doorway, but it has no latch, no hinges, no frame. Only a gate that exists because the mind insists there must be one. And the moment you stop trying to walk through it, it disappears. The novice became obsessed. He stopped eating. He stopped speaking. He carried Mu through every moment like a fever dream. He touched it while pouring tea. He chewed it like rice. He sat with it in the dark until the wind outside sounded like it was chanting back to him. "M, m, m." He began to tremble. And still, no clarity, no breakthrough, only silence. One dawn, after 300 days of silent retreat, he broke. He stood in the rain, lifted his head to the grey sky, and shouted, "What is Mu?" The sound echoed against the temple walls. A bird fluttered. A branch creaked, but nothing answered. He fell to his knees, not in defeat, in surrender, not to ignorance, but to not knowing. And in that moment, he let go, not just of the question, but of the one who needed the answer. And that's when it happened. Not a flash, not a thunderclap, just a quiet shift, a falling away, and everything returned. The wind, the breath, the feeling of water on his skin, the sound of a dog barking in the distance. Nothing extraordinary, and yet everything was different. He stood, he laughed, he bowed. Later, when the novice returned to Joshu, the master asked no questions. He looked once in the monk's eyes and simply said, "Good." Nothing more, because no explanation was needed. You cannot explain Mu, you can only become it. Commentary. In Western terms, we often ask, is it this or that? Zen asks, who is asking? Joshu's Mu is not a negation of the dog's Buddha nature. It is a negation of the very framework of the question. To ask, does a dog have Buddha nature, is to separate Buddha nature from dog, to assume that it's something a being might possess. But Buddha nature is not a possession. It is not a label. It is the breath before thought, the space before division. Mu is the erasure of the chalkboard before the question is even written. Zen does not want you to answer the question. It wants the question to consume you. Until there's nothing left. Until only presence remains. Until even Mu is forgotten. And the wind in the pines is enough. The gateless gate is open to all. But to pass through, you must stop trying to pass. You must stop searching for the latch. There is no Mu outside yourself. It is not in the words of sutras, not in the mind's debate. It is here, now, when all seeking stops, and the moment is allowed to be, just as it is. Even a barking dog, even your own confusion, even the silence after reading this sentence. In the hush of understanding, Zen offers us another glimpse of what it means to recognize worth not by weight or shine, but by presence. Here starts the next story. In the heart of a wealthy city, wrapped in silk and stone, lived a man who had everything. Gold draped his halls. Ivory framed his mirrors. Incense curled in soft waves from brass burners that never cooled. His name was Viran. He owned land, warehouses, servants, even ships that crossed oceans bearing his name on their sails. And yet, he could not sleep. Each night, he turned beneath embroidered sheets, his mind counting coins like sheep. Each morning, he awoke with new orders, new demands, new acquisitions. He kept building, kept gathering, but inside there was a tightness he could not name. One day, as he stepped from his carriage, he noticed a beggar sitting beside the temple gate. The beggar's robe was faded and torn. His alms bowl was empty, but his eyes were calm, still as a pond before dawn. Viran glanced at him and scoffed. "If I had nothing," he said, "I would not smile." The beggar bowed. "If you truly had nothing," he said, "you might finally know peace." The words followed Viran like a shadow. He tried to forget them, tried to drown them in wine, in silk, in celebration. But they clung like a thread caught in the lining of his soul. The next morning, he returned to the temple. The beggar was still there, eyes closed, back straight, breath soft. "How do you do this?" Viran asked. "You have no food, no roof, no gold, and yet you sit like you own the world." The beggar opened his eyes. "I do not own the world," he said, "but the world no longer owns me." Viran stared. Something inside him cracked. That day he left behind his ring. The next, his jeweled belt. Then quietly, he began walking to the temple each morning, leaving behind one possession at a time. No ceremony, no announcement, just letting go, piece by piece. The beggar never asked, never praised. He simply shared his seat on the stone step. Weeks passed. One morning, Viran arrived barefoot. No rings, no silks, no guards, only his breath and the ache in his knees. He sat beside the beggar, closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he felt nothing pulling at him. No hunger for more, no fear of losing, no need to be seen, just stillness. He opened his eyes. "Have I become poor?" he asked. The beggar smiled. "No," he said softly. "You've become free." This is the story of true wealth, the kind that doesn't glitter, but glows from within. Commentary: wealth is not evil, it is neutral. Like a knife, it can feed or wound. Like fire, it can warm or consume. The Buddha taught that attachment, not possession, is the root of suffering. You can have little and still cling. You can have much and still be free. The beggar was not rich in gold, but he had space. He had his breath, his presence, his peace. He was not owned by anything, not even his own suffering. The parable reminds us, you are not your bank balance, not your reputation, not your wardrobe or your followers. You are the one who notices, the one who breathes, the one who can let go. Letting go is not about loss. It is about choice. When you no longer need a thing to feel complete, you are free to enjoy it or leave it without fear. That is the highest wealth. There's a Zen proverb, when I had nothing, I had everything. It does not mean destitution. It means this: when your hands are not full of fear and control, they are finally open to life. So whether you own much or little, ask yourself, do these things serve me? Or do I serve them? If they crumble, do I crumble too? Or am I the same presence, the same breath, the same open sky? Regardless, true wealth is not counted. It is felt. It is the spaciousness of a mind that can sit still beside a bowl, empty or full, and smile just the same. Be that kind of rich. There was once a garden behind a monastery. Not grand, not famous, just a quiet patch of earth behind the northern wall. Monks took turns tending it, pulling weeds, watering rows of vegetables, scattering herbs for bees. But there was one monk, young and full of questions, who never understood the point. His name was Anyo. He had come to the monastery seeking answers about karma, rebirth, and enlightenment, and all he seemed to be doing was weeding cabbages. One morning, he sat in the dirt beside the old gardener, Master Banzan, and asked, "Why am I here? I came to learn the truth of existence, not harvest radishes." Banzan didn't look up. He plucked a small stone from the soil and said, "Tell me, Anyo, do you know what kind of seed this is?" Anyo shook his head. Banzan smiled. "Neither do I, but we'll find out in time." Later that week, the master handed Anyo a pouch of seeds. "Plant these," he said, "just one each day." So Anyo did. One on Monday, one on Tuesday, one on Wednesday. By the second week he asked, "What are they?" Banzan only replied, "Keep planting." Weeks passed. Shoots emerged. Some were thin and green, some strong and red-veined, some curled into spirals, others drooped under their own weight. Anyo began to notice which plants needed more water, which thrived in shade, which invited birds. He stopped asking what they were and started tending them for what they needed. By midsummer, the garden had transformed, not because of what Anyo had planted, but because of how he had planted. This is the story of karma as intention, how what we plant becomes our world. Commentary. We often think of karma as a great book in the sky, that someone somewhere is keeping score. But karma is not accounting, it's gardening. Every thought, word, and action is a seed. Some bloom quickly, some take years, some seem to disappear, only to sprout when the rains return. Anyo wanted to learn about karma, but he expected a scroll, a sermon, or a secret. Instead, he got a pouch of seeds. Because karma isn't something you learn, it's something you live. You discover it with every gesture, every tone in your voice, every time you choose to act with care, or without it. Some people say, "But I didn't mean to hurt anyone." But even unintentional seeds grow. A sharp word, a careless gesture, a forgotten promise. Each one goes into the soil of the world. But so do quiet kindnesses. a bowl of warm rice, a door held open, a moment of patience with someone slower than you. These bloom too, even when you never see them again. Banzan once said to Anyo, "Don't ask what the seed will become. Ask what the soil needs today." That is the heart of intention. Not just what you do, but why. Karma begins not with action, but with intention. Even the Buddha said, "It is volition, monks, that I call karma. For having willed, one acts by body, speech, and mind." Years later, Anyo became a teacher. He no longer spoke of karma as fate. He taught his students how to garden their lives, how to pause before speaking, how to breathe before judging, how to water what they wish to grow, inside themselves and others. One student once asked him, "What is the best seed to plant?" Anyo smiled and said, "Attention to this moment and how you meet it." So the next time you move through your day, ask yourself, what am I planting and where? Because every moment is soil. And your attention is the seed in the heart of the Himalayan foothills, where the clouds hung low and the trees grew tall enough to brush the sky. There lived an elephant unlike any other. He was large, yes, towering and strong. But it was not his size that set him apart. It was his silence, his gentleness, the way he walked through the forest without disturbing a single leaf. The other animals called him Chadanta, though few ever spoke directly to him. They simply watched, from trees, from burrows, from the safety of shadow, as he moved like a mountain in motion. He was the Buddha in a past life. And this is the story of his strength, not in battle, but in sacrifice. Chadanta lived alone by choice. He did not shun the world, but neither did he cling to it. He bathed in still lakes at sunrise. He ate from the same fig tree each day, taking only what he needed. When storms came, he broke branches to shelter smaller creatures. And when conflict stirred among the animals, he was the one they turned to, not for punishment, but for peace. Yet peace often invites jealousy, and far from the forest, deep within a palace carved of stone and silence, a queen sat with bitterness in her heart. She had once lived in that forest, a doe, soft-eyed and quiet, and long ago, when Chadanta had ruled a great elephant herd, she had been among them. She had loved him, deeply, without condition, but he had never looked her way, never spoken her name, never returned what she offered. And so, in her next life, reborn as a queen, she remembered only the wound, and she wanted revenge. She summoned the royal hunter and said, "In the northern forest lives a white-tusked elephant. His hide is pale, his eyes are gold. Bring me his tusks, no matter the cost." The hunter hesitated. It is said that he is gentle, wise. "All the more reason," she said, "to prove that the gentle can bleed." And so, with blade and bow, the hunter travelled north, through jungle, through rain, through weeks of silence, until he found the clearing near the fig tree. There stood Chadanta, still, listening to the wind. The hunter watched from behind the trees. He waited 3 days, but the elephant did nothing wrong. He did not rage, did not attack, did not falter. Only once did he cry out, and that was when he helped a small bird fallen from its nest. On the 4th morning, the hunter stepped forward. Chadanta turned, And in that moment he knew. He saw the blade, saw the sorrow, saw the karma rising like fog. And yet, he did not move. "You have come for my tusks," he said. The hunter froze. "How did you—" "I remember," Chadanta said. "She was hurt. She never let it go." The wind stirred the trees. The lake nearby rippled. "I will not fight you," he said. "Take what you came for." The hunter lowered his bow. "But I cannot kill you." "Then don't," said the elephant. "I will kneel. You may take the tusks. Spare the rest." And slowly, with the dignity of one who walks willingly toward pain, Chadanta lowered himself to the earth. The hunter wept as he worked, not because the task was hard, but because the elephant never once flinched. When the blade cut deep, he did not cry out. When the ivory came free, he did not recoil. He only said quietly, "May she find peace now." The hunter carried the tusks back to the palace. And when the queen saw them, gleaming, perfect, wrapped in bloodied cloth, she felt no triumph, only weight. She touched them once, and then began to shake, for in that moment her memories returned fully. Not of rejection, but of Chadanta lifting a fallen calf, of standing watch while others slept, of refusing to harm a single creature even when threatened. And now, that being had offered his very body. For her. She collapsed, and in her next life, it is said, she returned to the forest as a healer, not to take tusks, but to mend wounds. The story of Chadanta spread far beyond the forest. Monks carved his image into cave walls. Children whispered his name when they felt afraid, not because he was mighty, but because he proved that strength is not in what you strike, but in what you endure for the sake of others. Because true power needs no roar, it needs no armor. It needs only presence and the willingness to give without hatred, even to those who once wished you harm. As the lantern of awareness glows a little brighter, we come to a tale about seeing with more than the eyes. Let the stillness guide you now, and listen carefully to the next story.